Two teams get ready to square off and head right out the gate. There indeed is that Void Emissary that we alluded to earlier. Nice little hop up there by Wong on top of the house. But Nagaro, we already know what's going to happen to these two teams. We are, of course, from the future, so we can see that they're going to line of sight onto the side, grab those double enforcers. And, you know, this pull actually, we kind of undervalue this pull. This pull is very dangerous here at the start of the dungeon. Both teams did it quite well last time.
Yeah, they definitely did a good job last time around to make sure they deal with this properly. Lots of tank damage here on top of having to deal with everything else. You can see the Restitute Anvis here standing on top of a ledge to prevent some of those mechanics happening, to prevent the enforcers throwing the tank, basically. Now, that can be a very dangerous mechanic if the tank just gets knocked or gets thrown into some other ability or thrown into an area that he doesn't want to be in. And we see all of the mobs raging at the same time now as the tanks just run away, and you can see the Vortex coming out of the Rasta Druids. You can see the Typhoon from Anvis as well. One thing to note is that AAA is actually running Mass Root instead of Typhoon.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a weird call. Well, it makes sense.
For the last boss, probably.
Yeah, for the last boss, but, you know, that Typhoon's really nice for support. We saw it earlier for the Raging Mobs, leading to the second and third boss for the tank, so a bit of loss there. I mean, you can, of course, use Mass Roots to help in that scenario, too, but they're going to very quickly get broken by the amount of damage coming out of the Rogues and, of course, the Unholy DK as well. Well, really just the Rogues. They don't have an Unholy on the side of AAA. Nonetheless, Sky Captain Craig is engaged here from Black Mamba, just like we saw them first to it on the previous map. They've finally dedicated their Bloodlust to it. AAA has dedicated it to a larger trash pull earlier, which is why they are sitting at 19% on trash, and Black Mamba sitting at 14. Black Mamba has combined trash with that Bloodlust on top of the boss, though.
Yeah, so Black Mamba dealing with this with the Bonesaw trash here on top of the boss, which is scary, to be honest. Even on a fortified setting, this boss still does a lot of damage. You have the random shots coming out, which if you don't spread out properly and you get multiple hits on people, it does do a lot of damage. So they gotta watch out here, especially with the Raging affix, but they seem to be doing a decent job. Also on top of that, we have the Grievous, which again does cause some problems for the tank, and it also, of course, is just annoying because for the healer, if the whole group gets a little bit of damage, usually you don't have to put any sort of resources into that damage because over time it's just going to passively get healed up. But because of Grievous, you have to immediately heal the people up to not have the Grievous stack to 4.
Yeah, speaking of Grievous stack and 4, we can see that on Lee right now as Juan finally gets him past that 90% threshold. A lot of pressure on the healer and on the tank there just because of that disease, once again, that cannot be dispelled on the side of AAA, who pulled as well the Bonesaw on top of the boss. Now, if I'm not mistaken, in the previous go, before we had to remake AAA, both teams were actually at 19% trash before they finished the boss. So it looks like this time AAA actually pulled even more, an extra 3% worth of trash along with the boss. Well, the 3-pack with the boss, the same one that Black Mamba did. So a bit of an advantage there as far as that's concerned. However, it has also led to Black Mamba finishing the boss even further ahead of AAA versus the pre-remake version of this. So onto the bridge they go, and down into the Council of Captain's area. We can see lovely view of a few sunken ships and the SS Tettles in the distance.
So one thing I want to note about the remake here is that it might actually be helping out Black Mamba quite a bit here, just because we've seen Black Mamba struggle so much with execution on those pulls in previous dungeons. But if you play a dungeon back to back and you have issues before, you definitely know what exactly caused those problems. So maybe Black Mamba can recover this time around and not actually have any of those huge execution mistakes, because that's the name of the game for Black Mamba, really. Almost any dungeon we've seen so far in this cup this weekend, we had Black Mamba make some sort of huge mistake and have a bunch of deaths coming in. So I want to see Black Mamba have a really good execution here, even if they have to pull a little bit smaller, which is not going to make or break it against AAA, right? Because AAA is also pulling smaller compared to some teams like Bafor and Rogue or Team D. So I just want to see perfect execution by Black Mamba here.
We all want to see perfect execution coming out of all the teams, but we can't always get what we want, unfortunately.
But why not?
Because you're the one that asked. Black Mamba has done their big pull here, this time not going as swimmingly as before. Already one of the Rogues has died. So come to damage. Wong going down quite low, just barely hanging on 10% HP, spamming Ignore Pain. Triple debuff there, slowing his movement, so he has to heroic leap out. He is slowed by 50%. Kind of hard to kite the mobs around when you are slowed, but managed to get most of the mobs down in this dangerous Raging situation. A lot of damage coming out of that Unholy, but they don't have their battle res now available for 5 minutes as the second Rogue did fall. You know, this trash, obviously we keep talking about the tank danger, but there's a lot of danger coming onto the group as well. There's Blind Rage that goes out, there's a Whirlwind from the Buccaneer that goes out, so combine that with Raging, you can easily have some spot deaths on the rest of the group, which we just saw there on one of the Rogues on Black Mamba.
And you also have the huge frost scale, the casting and a frontal cone, and we see the tank go down for AAA again. This exact same pack they wiped to before. We're going to see a repeat of the same thing that happened earlier. But this time around, we can't have the Shadow Melt. The Resolute doesn't get the Shadow Melt off. So that means one has to release, has to run all the way back. This time they're going to lose even more time than they did last time around. Black Mamba, on the other hand, they did have this one death coming in, but they managed to finish off the pull anyway.
Yeah, not looking good here. We're going to have triple Fs in chat for AAA right now as 4 deaths on the board waiting for them to run back over. Black Mamba, once again, looking pretty good here. A slightly more modest pull than what they just did prior to this, so about a 5-pack here. Hopefully they can lock it down properly. There are no brine scales active in this group for them to pummel the tank with their frost bolt, so should be okay. A lot of damage coming in on a second rogue though, who does not have that cheat death available as he died in the previous large pull from the group. We see a bit of backpedal kiting here from Wong, making sure that he's not getting meleeed too many times with that raging buff, but it looks like they've done this one quite well. The scrappers left, of course. They dealt with the enchanted emissary on the side, and only now are AAA getting back on their feet and getting ready to pull again. So I mean, Black Mamba looking like they're in a great situation here in Agura, but we've seen in the previous series how many times they've had issues through dungeons and just kind of thrown the ball to the other, the other half court. So we'll see if they can pull it off this time.
Yeah, I mean, Black Mamba again struggling, in general, struggling so much in dungeons. So this definitely does not mean that Black Mamba is just going to straight up win here, because so many things went wrong for them in the past. Now, on this boss specifically, before they had one rogue die and they didn't have a battle rest available for them. So this time, again, no battle rests, so they can't have anyone go down anymore unless they want to 4-man the boss again, which happened last time around. It's costing them quite a bit of time here at the very end. While AAA is trying to do a very similar pull again.
Oh, SpaghettiOs. It looks like they got the Trapper on top of it, exactly what happened last time. Eudora jumped to the far opposite corner, and as a result, the Trapper social or proxy aggroed on top of the group right now. This is going to be really nasty, and they don't have a battle res either. The Trapper is rooting them all in place with the traps that he puts down, the rat traps. So if Eudora jumps to a bad position here, it could be pretty bad.
It can definitely be bad now. The traps can actually be handled by the Resolute, but the Resolute already has so many other things to do on top of dealing with healing the tank, healing the Grievous, and healing the Eudora powder shots, which just requires not only a lot of burst healing, but it also, with the Grievous, just makes it a little bit harder. But those traps, they can be cleared by the Resolute. You can walk through them if you while you are shapeshifted, and they will actually just disappear, which is a very interesting interaction. So Druids can just deal with them quite easily. As you can see, Envy's just being in bear form and just walking through them, removing them.
Yeah, really well done by them here. Unfortunately, the Unholy DK does fall at the very end, but they did manage to weather most of the storm right now as they killed off that Rat Trapper coming in. Eudora's still at 58% health, though, and Captain Jolly is going to be the first one to fall. Usually try to kill Eudora as quickly as possible. I mean, for obvious reasons, she's the very dangerous one, not only because of the powder shot that hits you for about half your health, but the grape shot as well that she's doing right now, jumping to the side, which is really what caused that fiasco in the first place by proxy aggroing that the Rat Pack that just happened to be patrolling at the same time. The reason they're fighting on the side, if you're just tuning in now, of course, is to avoid that void emissary that sits on the other side of the playfield, because it's a nasty one. Don't want to deal with that. Wong getting punted there by the Blade, everybody's favorite, most hated Blade for the tanking environment. Finally gets reabsorbed in Captain Jolly here as AAA starting to catch up a bit. Eudora here 28%, Captain Jolly 72%, but it's actually kind of scary how similar of what happened last dungeon's happening here. Black Mamba 4-manning the boss again without a battle res, 2 deaths on the board, just like last time. AAA 4 deaths on the board, had an almost total wipe to the same trash pack, and are slowly catching up on this boss. This is a bit deja vu-y here.
Maybe it's part of their strategy, those deaths and the 4-manning. That's probably what it is. So they're not actually making any mistakes. This is just what they're planning to do.
Stupid us being fooled again, right?
Yeah, unbelievable. No, but Black Mamba, having to step again, they were ahead, and now it's gonna cost them so much time. Now, one thing that was worrying me while I was watching Black Mamba is that this boss actually kind of likes to reset if one of your members is standing on some sort of elevated spot, and if you get targeted by the powder shot, if you're standing on an elevated area or like a bench or an top area, then the boss could reset. And Black Mamba not actually playing around that fact at all. It's a very known issue that can easily happen. So Black Mamba not playing around that, it could have caused some problems for them. Now, luckily it didn't, so they're on their way to this next boss area already. They did click the pick, and they're probably going to do the same thing as they did the last time.
Captain rule here, council captains rather, being finished here for AAA as they also pull the Rat Trapper on top of it. They immediately mount up and rush over to where Black Mamba currently is on the map, dealing with the Emissary of Tides. They've once again CC'd the Brine Scale on the side just to make sure that it can, it's not causing any havoc while the Emissary of Tides is up. Ludwig von Tortolin is now active yet again for them. Now, keep in mind, we're in a fortified environment. He already packs quite a punch, but fortunate to both teams, as is pretty standard these days, of course. We do have that Rested Druid available for Soothe once this mini boss gets that raging. Otherwise, the tank would get pummeled quite hard here. AAA doing a bit of a trash pull as well within the Ring of Booty.
Yeah, we'll see if they have any more troubles with this trash pull, and I actually want to like to see if Black Mamba is going to pull a Crusher on top of Trothek again, because it might have been a mistake, because they wanted to pull the neutral mobs on top, and you can, if you don't pull the neutral mobs properly, you can pull the Crusher as well that is standing up there. So in case the residue was sun firing instead of moon firing to pull them, it could have cleaved onto the Crusher, and that could have aggroed because of that. So we'll see if they do it again, if it was a planned pull or if it was just a mistake last time around. While AAA is also fighting Ludwig at this point. They're a little bit behind when it comes to Ludwig HP, but when it comes to, well, they're also behind in trash, so they're just behind in general.
Yeah, well, that's unlucky. Envy's there, taking one of the shells to the face quite unnecessarily and proccing his Undulating Tides. So just the dead Azurite trait right now for 45 seconds. Here comes the double pull from Black Mamba, the one they struggled with earlier that caused them to almost wipe and allow AAA to get back into the game. So hopefully they get some proper interrupts. We get a nice intimidating shout coming out of Wong just to get one round of interrupts on the mobs, and they're focusing down the Bronze Scales. A lot of damage coming in. Unfortunately, one of those Frost Blast frontals hits one of the rogues and the Unholy DK. Fortunately, no deaths for them or cheat death proc. Actually, the rogue doesn't even have cheat death available. A lot of damage coming in on Wong now, going bananas, and ricocheting throw coming out as the mobs enrage too. Good shockwave coming in from Wong as he just backs up. He's still holding onto his shield all as well, so he's very confident here that he can just tank the rest of this without committing too many resources. So good on them. Way cleaner this time. 74% trash as they get ready for Trothak. AAA still playing catch up here as Ludwig only now dies.
Yeah, good on Black Mamba here to pull off this trash pack without having any sort of problems this time around, and even saving those defensives as you mentioned. Now, they did pull the neutrals here on top of Trothek again. I don't see a Crusher yet, so maybe it was indeed a mistake the last time around and they didn't actually intend on pulling it. We'll see if they maybe get it on top later on or not. Well, AAA is also dealing with the same trash pack that Black Mamba pulled before Trothek. We'll see if they're going to be able to deal with it as nicely as Black Mamba did. Now, when it comes to utility for raging, they don't actually have that many things, right? They don't have the green rogue, they don't have the Windwalker with the Ring of Peace or the AoE stun to help them out with the kiting. And yeah, I mean, the Prot Warrior does have the AoE stun, but if you're the one who wants to kite, you don't want to go back in and use the stun, right? So definitely a little bit easier to kite if you have that Windwalker.
We also don't have the staff available from Envy's Undulating Tides again on cooldown for him, so that may be something that comes into play a bit later from AAA, who's now popped Tree of Life for Juan there, and just power healing through Trothak, along with what seems to be a pretty sizable trash ball. I believe there's a couple Brine Scales in there as well, so a lot of damage coming in, which is why they committed this Tree of Life cooldown to it. Undulating Tides proc there for Juan as well, so both healers running with that. Actually, we see most healers running with Undulating Tides just because of the extra damage that you get from it during the encounter and the extra safety net, especially when most teams play with only one battle res, and that happens to be oftentimes the healer. So Black Mamba here, 33% on Trothak with 79% trash. AAA sitting at 72% trash, 58% on Trothak. This is not too far apart. Obviously advantage here to Black Mamba, but one little Black Mamba style hiccup at any point from this point will definitely allow AAA to get back in the game very quickly.
Yeah, most definitely, especially because of the last boss that we've seen before. Teams just struggle so much, and the tank dropping so low by having all of those enforcers rage at the very same time. So definitely things can go wrong for them still at this point. Trothek on 5%, so they're going to be able to finish this off soon. And then I assume they're going to make their way to this last boss, because there's a lot of percentage you can gain from the last boss room, and you can make use of this friendly fire damage that the boss does.
You know, we're starting to split hairs here a bit, but the thing with Black Mamba right now, these things are going to start to chisel away at them. Black Mamba is going to be able to drop aggro with that Void Emissary that they just passed, much like AAA is, but once again, they have the Unholy DK, and Unholy DK cannot jump up to the ledge like the other four, so they're going to have to sacrifice the Unholy DK yet again. That's another death on the board, and they're going to have to spend the time resing it. All these things allow for AAA to slowly catch up right now. They're sitting at 79% trash in just a moment. Okay, I lied. 78% trash. I thought that last neutral would give them 79. They're already running over to that area too, so the 2 death difference has now been reduced to 1, and we're still waiting for the finally the res comes in and they get ready to pull Harlan. So getting closer and closer here, Nagura.
So the DK actually did manage to get off the Shadow Mel, so well done, but I'm not completely sure how he managed, but he probably popped his speed cooldown, just ran through and just popped his Shadow Mel just to get the D aggro. So
just to prove me wrong. How petty.
That too. I also really like the fact that, because usually if you have a DK, you might have, your tank pick up the mobs and then both the DK and the tank Shadow Melt, but they were just like, you know what, either you can Shadow Melt or you die, and then we're not gonna risk getting the whole group in combat. So I like what they did here. They also pulled the trash on top of Harlan Sweete immediately on pull and popped the Bloodlust, both for Black Mamba and AAA at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, both teams, playing it risky for the tank here. Wong this time in a much more stable situation than we saw in the pre-remake version of this map, where he dipped to like 7% HP and barely got healed. No resources left, though, except for that Spell Reflect, which is fine because the trash is mostly dead now. They're sitting at 90% trash. They'll obviously pull something else towards the end of the dungeon, likely a Ravager on top of the boss. Looks like they're already kind of moving in there, and indeed they do. Here comes the Officer along with 2 Buccaneers, so no Ravager pull for them, but of course this will not be the remaining 10% that they need. So that trash will die. They'll grab a Ravager towards the end and just let themselves cannibalize on the side, essentially, as Harlan Sweete is now at 70%, hitting second phase for AAA, who's sitting at 89% trash. Things looking good here for Black Mamba.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, here's where the Master is actually going to come in for AAA. So maybe they can kill the trash more effectively, because what you want to do with the Master is you can make use of it for the painful motivation, where you can root the mobs in place to make sure that the correct mobs are going to get debuffed by that damage over time effect, the painful motivation that just kills themselves. And you also can make use of the Master by rooting all the mobs in this artillery, in the friendly fire bombardment that is happening on all of the players below 60% of the boss HP. So Master is definitely useful here, but it's not going to be enough probably. As you can see, Black Mamba, they're on their way to down Harlan Sweete, and they only have to kill a couple more mobs and they're going to be it.
Yeah, and that's going to be it actually right now as Black Mamba finishes the map. And Hot Dog, we have a wiener here with
round the next level of Eastern teams and how they square up in the Underrot.
In the Underrot, indeed, as a pretty aggressive pull comes in here already from AAA. Back to the NBA meme names. Poor Zyro, I know, is just writhing in the back room that he's not able to be here right now. But I got you, Zyro. I got you. AAA here already popping their Bloodlust, committing to the rather large pull. Black Mamba and Nagura doing the same size pull, but holding on to that Bloodlust quite greedily.
Yeah, interesting. They might be saving their Bloodlust for the boss later on, which it is a tyrannical boss, so having the Bloodlust there definitely saves you quite a bit of time. And also having the DK, which has so much single target burst with the cooldowns up, that it scales really well with that Bloodlust, so maybe that's the reason why they want to save it. Compared to AAA, they don't have a DK, they have the Windwalker instead. And we've seen very different comms, especially in this Underrot, coming out from teams earlier, and both Black Mamba and AAA are also playing Horde here.
Yeah, Horde we've seen as a pretty popular choice amongst the teams, just because of that Arcane Torrent in Underrot, being able to strip that Bone Shield from the Guardian skeletons, excuse me, later after the Cragmag room. So advantage in that, but of course then they don't have the skip for Shadow Meld. But most teams aren't really doing a Shadow Meld skip in Underrot, so nice of AAA to kind of change it up here and change paces. We see the Bloodlust wearing off soon in about 10 seconds here for Black Mamba, who is already halfway through the Elderly Axa encounter. AAA fall, trying to get down there, but they're just finishing off the last 2 mobs here, putting them at above 20% trash. So that is the advantage they have over Black Mamba right now. But I don't know, I mean, you can make up a fair bit of trash quickly with a pretty aggressive pull.
Yeah, and to be honest, a little bit disappointed by Black Mamba's DK single target damage here. I thought they're gonna be, it's gonna be a lot higher, to be honest, because I've seen some DKs with the Bloodlust, with the army, just bursting up to 70, 80k single target DPS. So definitely a little bit lower here on Black Mamba's side. Maybe he didn't get the procs, maybe he got bad RNG, who knows? But that's the point where AAA can actually catch up, because keep in mind, AAA did 2 trash pulls before they went to Elderly Exa, meaning that they're 7% ahead in trash percentage. Now, both of these teams do have the Prot Warrior, meaning when it comes to Spell Reflect, they're going to be the same speed-wise.
Yeah, they are indeed. Black Mamba on the left side of the screen, downing the first boss versus, of course, Black Mamba Kobe on the AAA side. Only now 40% on Elderly Exa, trying to slam dunk that home. Black Mamba on the left side, getting ready and moving on into Cragmag's room. This is where a lot of the teams are kind of make or break, right? There's a lot of dangerous trash here. We go through it all the time. We, of course, have the Lashes with the Decaying Mind cast. That's a disease. They don't have a Dispel on the side of Black Mamba, something that is an advantage for AAA right now. You, of course, have the Blood Swarmers, absolutely lethal mob with their Screech and their Fixate melee on everybody. You have the Globules on the ground. You have the Maggots doing their frontal. So just crazy amounts of trash. This is a huge pull here for Black Mamba right now. Moon goes down, unfortunately, and they commit their battle res finally to get him up right now. Running around in circles, just trying to stabilize the pull. So many mobs so low, but Wong is out of cooldowns at this point. A lot of healing coming out of that Resto Dread as Wong goes away, tries to get out of the thick of things, but there is a Blood Swarmer on top of the Resto Druid. 2 of the DPS go down. Unholy DK's down. One of the Rogues is down as well. They're trying to stabilize, but this is looking messy here. Decaying Mind, unfortunately, goes on the last DPS that they have. He's unable to get dispelled, cannot heal through it. The Resto Druid goes down, and Wong is just trying to desperately finish up the rest of the pull here. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it, but these mobs are actually quite low, so he might be able to kill 1 or 2 off.
This is
there's the Decaying Mind.
This is this huge pull that we've seen from Team D and Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, and AAA doing the same thing and also failing to it, having everyone die. They're gonna have a full team wipe coming out here as well, unless he gets the... Oh, there's no Shadow Melt available. They're playing Horde, of course. So there's no way of them to reset the aggro. Full team wipe for both teams. Now, this is this insane pull that we've been talking about, that both the other 2 teams, the top 2 teams, pulled off perfectly in their run. And what happens to Black Mamba here is not only did they have 3 Blood Swarmers who were fixating people and doing a lot of damage, but they also had those Lashers cast go through. Now the Rogues one of them had the cloak ready to get rid of the debuff, which stuns you unless their heal is the absorb is healed away. But Moon did not have the cloak ready, so he got stunned by the Lasher cast, and then he died afterwards. And with 1 Rogue death, you lose so many interrupts, you lose so much single target control and damage, of course, and then everything just fell apart.
The problem is, even with all the utility and CC that you're talking about, there were emissaries of the Tides present in the pools, so you really can't do anything about it. You have to try and brute force, and Black Mamba just now getting back into it. I mean, the thing is, Black Mamba threw, and then AAA had a foul throw right back into it, so they're trying to do what they can to catch up here. 25%, so Black Mamba kind of got the better end of the deal there. They did manage to kill more of the trash before coming to the full wipe. 35-36% now trash, as AAA is trying to do what they can to rectify the situation. It looks like both teams are doing, obviously, a bit more modest of a pull. They don't have access to as many cooldowns as they did moments ago, but AAA already on the back foot. Their only saving grace right now is that they are at 5 deaths versus Black Mamba 7.
It was pretty lucky, to be honest, by Black Mamba to be able to finish off so many mobs by the tank, right? I mean, he didn't end up wiping at the very end, but he finished off most of the mobs because they were so low HP once everyone started dying off. So well done by Wong to actually be able to finish some of them, because we all know if you have a full team wipe going on in the middle of one of your trash pulls, they will reset their HP, they will heal up back to 100%. So if you have to engage those mobs again and deal with them again, you lose a lot more time than what just happened to Black Mamba. AAA, not so lucky. They did have almost all of their mobs reset, so they will have to do the same thing again. As they're struggling right here again with those 2 Blood Swarmers, and actually Nick going down here. They do have a battle rest, but the Blood Swarmers is doing so much damage. You can see in the group how low they're dropping.
Yeah, I'm not sure this is sustainable right now. We already have the Rig of Peace Denial come down from Smith right now, and technical foul as J.R. Smith goes down. Nick Young eating some damage to the face as well, and goes down yet again. Their battle res, as you mentioned, is gone. Don't have that available for 4 minutes. Both of the 2 DPS release immediately and try to run back into Cragmag's room, as Black Mamba has grabbed a rather large trash pull right now. They've blinded the Death Speaker on the side so they don't deal with any of the Wicked Frenzy, and are just cleaving everything on top of Cragmag. This is a pretty aggressive pull here, but again, I mean, we go through this. There's no point not doing this if you can handle it. There's no affixes that prevent you from doing this. It's obviously just a lot of pressure, not only on the tank, but on the group as well, because of the amount of control that is needed on this.
Yeah, and one thing to know, the Death Knight helps you out so much with those huge AoE pulls. AAA doing those same pulls without having this Death Knight, without having this huge AoE burst, it's just it's just not working out for them as well as it is for Black Mamba. Of course, Black Mamba also making those mistakes, but that didn't really have anything to do with them not having enough damage. It was mostly just them making execution mistakes. Now they did finish off this trash pull here, very nicely done by Black Mamba, so they only have to finish off Cragmag now. There's still a Death Speaker, I believe, in the corner, which they could also finish off still to get a little bit extra percentage, but at this point Cragmag not a huge problem really. It is tyrannical, so it's going to do a little bit more damage than what we've seen in the past with Fortified, but none of the affixes are affecting the damage here, so that's not going to be an extra problem.
No, it shouldn't be too much of a problem right now, and it looks like Black Mamba is well stabilized. Finally, the Death Speaker and one of the Guardians, of course, because the Death Speaker was on its by itself on the side. So what happens is, of course, they cast the Raise Dead, which spawns another Guardian. Nobody was there to interrupt it. It was 60, 80 yards away, so they're just going to have to deal with one more Guardian on top of the group, which it doesn't really matter, quite frankly. It's not too dangerous if a mob by itself, as long as Wicked Frenzies don't get cast. It's all good to go. Tantrum about to be cast here by Cragmag. As you can see, the energy bar is filled up. Now it's empty because he just cast Tantrum. So we do have energy bars available here for the bosses, something that we haven't had in previous MDI. So nice to finally see and predict when the bosses are about to do their abilities for those that have the application of energy to them or whatever resource they might use. AAA here, 59% trash. They're also dealing with Cragmag, about to have their first Tantrum in just a moment. It's 70% on the boss, and Black Mamba 64% trash and 28 on the boss. So certainly looking in much better position. And Nagar, the saving grace that AAA had earlier was that they had a 2-death difference between them, but they squandered that earlier with a lot of those deaths that we saw between Nick Young and Smith. So
yeah, it's pretty even again, to be honest. I mean, they're behind in boss DPS, as you can see, and on a tyrannical fight it means quite a bit. To be a 40% difference means quite a bit because you can see how long Black Mamba is fighting Cragmag here, but both of those teams constantly make those mistakes throughout the dungeon, so anything can happen still, and there's a lot more difficult pulls coming up that we've seen being beautiful done before by Buffwar, Nerfrogue and Team D. But of course Black Mamba and AAA having a lot more problems than those two teams, and we're gonna come up to the skeleton packs now, to the Guardians. One of them already being pulled on top of the boss, but now there's gonna be even more, and this is one of the main reasons why they're running Blood Elves, because this Arcane Torrent is a mass AoE dispel basically, which helps them so much for the Guardians, just because they constantly cast those bone shields, putting an absorb on them. So you can rotate your Arcane Torrent to get rid of those bone shields and just be way more efficient with this shield.
Yep, this is a pretty aggressive pull coming in here again for Black Mamba right now. Just finally got Battle Res available. Again, both teams did it. They didn't have any Battle Reses available to them. So pretty aggressive pull here. Raise Dead interrupted well into that speaker. Tries to cast again, but easily locked down by the group. Emissary of Tides, I believe, is rooted off screen to the right of where the observers are looking right now. There it is indeed. And finally, they drag the mobs over to it now that they've killed the 2 Death Speakers and why am I forgetting the name of the big caster? The big caster. The Defiler. Thank you. Too many names, too little time. The Defiler has been killed off as well, so there's no real danger in here if any dangerous cast going through or any crowd control that you need that the Emissary of Tides would prevent. So no problem for them. 72%, 75 now as they start to rush over to Sporecaller Zonta, the 3rd boss of the dungeon, moon channeling his latent arcana trinket from Queen Ashar in the Eternal Palace, as Cragmag drops to 8% for AAA, and they're getting ready to do the same trash that Black Mamba's already done with.
Yeah, so Black Mamba does pull the Defilers on top of Sporecaller Zonta here. They do have their heroism, ready right now, their Bloodlust. So, well, they're playing Horda, so it's a Bloodlust.
How dare you? It's always called Bloodlust. I don't care if a mage does it. I don't care if Alliance do it.
Anyway, they do have the Bloodlust available. They might save it for the last boss, which is something we've seen quite a lot coming out of these teams. But if they pull trash on top here of Sporecaller Zonta, it might actually be more efficient to use it here. We'll see. are still holding on to it, so at this point I doubt they're going to use it anymore, so probably going to save it for the last boss. One more thing to note here is that the Emissary of Tides is constantly being rooted by the Raster Druid, and it definitely helps to have that Tree of Life form, because the tree actually makes your Entangling Roots be an instant cast.
Yeah, we saw a bit of danger coming up. Moon got clipped by one of the globules or orbs that come out of the mushrooms that explodes, and Wong actually got hit by 2 of them, so they just managed to immediately use that Rallying Cry just to save some of that damage and help the team out. But they managed to stabilize, of course. Black Mamba does not have a Disease Dispel, whereas AAA has a Disease Dispel in, just as an emergency. If you need to soak a couple mushrooms, you don't have the cloaks available. So J.R. Smith, of course, has that Dispel. 82% for Black Mamba, and Sporecaller Zonta is already at 50% HP. Not the most dangerous boss in the world, so I don't really foresee any of the teams having troubles, although we have seen teams wipe on this boss. We've seen some boo-boos and errors with eating some of the mushrooms in the previous season. Nothing so far this season as Wong grabs that last mushroom to make sure that not the entire team is affected by that dot.
Oh, unfortunately, AAA does get a cast off one of those withered curse that go off from the Defilers. Now, they pulled the boss at the same time, meaning that most of the damage dealers are probably going to use their cooldowns, their offensive cooldowns, and that curse actually does apply a 10% damage reduction if you only have 1 stack of it. So, and another curse actually going off. So
I think it's 2% per stack.
Oh, 2%, okay.
But still, I mean, that's the last
damage reduction.
And I also love that the Druid greedily dispelled himself instead of one of the damage dealers. The decurse.
But yeah, they actually popped their Bloodlust now as they're having trouble with the Death Speaker casting one of the Wicked Frenzies on one of the Guardians, I believe, because the tank was having this magic debuff that is being caused by the Wicked Frenzy and Rage buff on the Guardian. So I'm not completely sure if it wasn't. Oh, that tank actually going down. They don't have a battle rest, so they have to reset the boss.
I will take responsibility for this caster curse, saying that nobody really wipes on this boss. So it looks like a good heads-up play from the team to actually reset the boss and try to finish that Emissary Tides off before things get out of hand. Let's not forget, though, the Wicked Curse, when it goes on a warrior, can actually spell Reflected back for some extra damage. So a bit of play there. But Jeremy Lin just, he's just on the floor eating dirt, unfortunately. So that's 10 deaths on the board right now for AAA. They're going to have to wait to get him back up. And Black Mamba's already moved past Sporecaller Zonta. Rather aggressive pull, but the same really pull that we see most teams do here, consisting of the Death Speaker Guardians, the Danger Noodle, and of course the Defilers in there. Sometimes we see teams grab one of the Abominations on the side as well, but it looks like they're playing it just a bit safer. Once again, I mean, they probably know what their opponent is up against right now.
Yeah, this is a disaster for AAA. Not only do they have the full team wipe, or almost a full team wipe, they also lost their Bloodlust. So they lost the Bloodlust right after they popped it, basically, just 15 seconds after. So huge mistake by AAA, having no battle rests for the tank death. And, unfortunately, they can reset the boss, just run out and pull it back. But still, just an insane amount of time lost. Well, Black Mamba seems to have recovered from the Cragmag room mistake that they made earlier, where they did have a wipe come in as well. But outside of that, not many mistakes out of Black Mamba anymore. Right after the Cragmag room, everything went pretty smoothly for them, as they're on their way to they only have to deal with those 2 Corruptors and the Emissary of Tides. Then they will be reaching 100% trash, and then they're going to be able to access the last boss.
Access the last boss indeed soon for them, as the Abyssal Reaches come out in the corner. The team does well to hopefully shift away from it. Maybe I spoke too soon, but they do shift away from it. Those can deal a substantial amount of damage, even in this tyrannical environment, so you want to avoid those tentacle slaps at all costs. AAA, 84% trash, and still 55% on Zonta. Of course, as Dagor stated, they did have to completely restart the boss without any access to Bloodlust, something that Black Mamba still has access to. So there is, all right, we're not saying it. There is likely no way Black Mamba is losing this match, but anything can happen. I don't think we've actually ever seen somebody wipe on the last boss. Remember, Elsarat died, but they managed to kill the boss off without the healer. So I don't think we've ever seen a full wipe on this last boss in any of the seasons this year.
But it was 45 the last time around, as far as I can remember. So, tyrannical, there's a chance that people are dying. I mean, in the end, this boss here is not mechanically very difficult. It just does create a lot of group damage because of this buff, that the debuff, that you can see under group frames right now stacking up. It constantly stacks up, it's just taking damage, and then on top of that you have the frontal cone, that if you get hit by it with a tick of the debuff can cause problems, can kill somebody, and then you also have the spores who run around in this room. Now, you usually should not be getting hit by the spores, of course, because you're hiding the boss away from them, and you to see them or kill them when they get close. They don't have a lot of HP. But sometimes it actually can happen that a spore spawns on top of you or very close to you and it immediately explodes. So that's when someone can actually go down. But they also have a battle rest available. They have a DK and a rest to do it. So even if the healer goes down, they can get him back up.
They can indeed, and should be no problem here as they're dealing with, well, soon their second wave of the 3 waves of blood effigies that they need to kill for the boss to go down. We can see the energy bar at the bottom for the Unbound Abomination. That energy bar fills as the players DPS him rather than his health going down. We all know that concept, just nice to finally be able to visualize it here because we haven't been able to in previous MDIs. Nick Young proccing Cheat Death on the side of AAA right now. That has finally down Sporecaller Zonta and is doing an aggressive pull. Smith getting frontaled by one of those tentacles and just taking an immense amount of damage but not falling. They don't have the battle res available and things are looking quite unstable here as Kobe tries to heal up the team right now, but Jeremy Lin about to go down and the Wicked Frenzy again. Just so much damage on Jeremy Lin, who once again just face plants into the ground. Unbound Abomination here about to enter its final phase, and I mean the buzzer beater just didn't work out for AAA this time.
That was the last ditch effort, to be honest, by AAA, because they probably knew that they were very far behind at this point, just tried to pull a lot of trash together and it didn't work out as Black Mamba is finishing off the last Blood Visage and they're gonna be winning this match against AAA 2-0.
Man,
Rogue, because for me personally, I think Buff Warrior and Rogue are the total favorites. If Black Mamba is going to win, that's going to be a huge upset in my opinion. So interesting to see that the votes are actually this close. And again, we do see the Vengeance Demon Hunter from Buff Warrior and Rogue coming out. Now, if it works out with the Vengeance strategy that they were showing the last time around, it is beautiful and they get a lot of time saved by it. But if it doesn't work out, and they did mess up some of the pulls earlier the last time they played this dungeon, then it's not even worth it at all. So we'll see how Buff Warrior Rogue does it this time around with Black Mamba not having this Vengeance Demon Hunter available to them.
Yeah, I think that was a very generous Twitch vote from Twitch chat. I think they like, I don't know, I feel like there was some bias there and maybe a team name or something, because Buff Warrior Rogue, throughout how they've played in this tournament, has just been way better than Black Mamba. I mean, the desk was mentioning a good example, like the falling upwards thing that they were talking about earlier. That definitely seems like it was. But Jing was literally 1% HP there, actually, for a second. And I don't think he's running Cheat Death either, so that could have been really bad if they do have a battle res, but that was just very scary. He was up to something. He's still at 36 necrotic stacks, so he pretty much can't be healed. That's why you see him kiting around so far. But ooh, that could have been a battle res right off the bat there. So fortunately, don't have to expend that. They are going to have that available for the next 8 minutes because he didn't go down. So good on them for that. But a little bit of a scary first pull for Buff Warrior Rogue.
Yeah, definitely scary for them. As you can see, Jing just dropping so low, having all these necrotics, even struggling on these 2 mobs here as well. But they did finish off the pull now, so they can pull the boss. They have their Bloodlust available. I assume they're gonna. There we go. They popped it for both teams actually. Black Mamba also fighting the first boss, also popping that Bloodlust. Buff Warrior Rogue slightly ahead in trash, but only 2% to be honest. And Black Mamba pulled the boss quite a bit earlier, so Black Mamba doing a really good job dealing with the trash before this boss. While I mean, it looked like Buff Warrior and Rogue are doing a much bigger pull, and it looked flashier for them. But in the end, they're not actually that much faster compared to Black Mamba.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been faster if they were able to pull it off more clean, but because their tank ended up having to kite and not reset those necrotic stacks, the mobs got kind of spread out, so they couldn't be quite as efficient as they wanted to be there. So, you know, a little bit of inefficiency there for Buff Warrior and Rogue. But I mean, Buff Warrior and Rogue, we've seen their route through this dungeon. It is quite clean, so we have to see Black Mamba really pull off a clean run here. They can't have any of those early wipes that we've seen from them in almost every single dungeon this entire weekend. And I mean, maybe if they do that, they can actually come out on top. We do see off the bat there is a death on the side of Buff Warrior and Rogue. They're not going to expend their battle res because the boss is at 5%, so it'd be kind of a weird use of a battle res. They're just going to manually res him up there and then move into trash wall while he's kind of running back from the res. But yeah, I mean, just a little bit of a mistake. 5 seconds on the board plus the res timer. Well, they have to wait for the res to go off as well. So a little bit of a disadvantage for Buff Warrior and Rogue, but there's still plenty of time left in this dungeon.
Yeah, and Black Mamba, they are dealing with some of the trash afterwards. Now, one thing to note is that Black Mamba is playing Horde, while Buff Warrior Rogue is playing Alliance. So there's going to be a difference in some of the things that are going to happen between those two teams. Not only do they start in a different area, they also have different mobs available in this dungeon. Now, one thing that is an advantage for Horde is that you actually get those gutters that basically just give you a free count because they're fighting each other, they kill each other, so all you have to do is have your healer, for example, tag them. So on the other side of this river here in the middle of the room, on Black Mamba's side, there's a bunch of people just fighting each other, as you can see it right off to the side here behind the damage meter. So the healer is going to go and just Sunfire, Moonfire them to be able to get the extra count. Well, Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, being Alliance, having the Shadow Melt available to them, but not having the advantages that Horde does get in Siege.
So here's one of the spots we see them use that Sigil of Misery to perfection here, using the, keeping them feared in one place so that the spotter will kill them pretty much for them there all by itself. And, perfect execution there from the Vengeance Demon Hunter. Of course, similar strategy from Black Mamba as well, but you can see Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue is able to more efficiently place their spotter shots because they know that their first 2 spotter shots will for sure hit those first 4 mobs. So they get a little bit of a time advantage and efficiency advantage because they know exactly how much damage they have to do to each mob based off those spotter shots.
Yeah, and when you look at Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, it's all gonna be about the spotter, right? This is why they're playing the Vengeance Demon Hunter. It plays such a huge role in their whole Siege strategy here. We haven't really seen anything like this before, and when I saw it be done perfectly by them, it was just a beautiful thing, right? You just see the Sigil come out, you see all of the mobs being gathered perfectly, all of them being feared, standing in that CC, and then on top of that, you also need to make sure that all of your people are in the correct position, right? Because the artillery that is coming out of the spotter does randomly target a person. So if you set up this whole CC with the fear, with the sigil, and then whoever is getting targeted by the artillery is not actually in the right position, then you did it all for nothing. So you want to make sure that each person is standing in the correct spot, and because you can stack all of the 4 artillery shots on top of each other as long as you position yourself properly. You don't want to stand directly on top of everything. You want to stand a little bit off so you can not die and still hit all 4 of them on top.
Yep, a little bit of a give and take on the side of Black Mamba as their DK goes down whenever they try to do that skip on the bridge, so they do use an out-of-combat res, so both teams still have their 1 combat res available, although they both have 1 death available, one death on their column as well, giving them 5 seconds extra on the timer. So because of that death, Buff Warrior was able to pull the boss a little bit sooner than Black Mamba was, and both teams going for a similar strategy where they end up pulling all of the trash on top of the boss with the spotter and kind of cleave everything down, making sure they, of course, focus the Cannoneer down because it can't be dealt damage by the spotter's artillery barrage. But both teams doing a similar strategy, it appears, where they're keeping the spotter alive because they're planning on using it for a massive trash pack after the boss. We did see Supreme also get hit by one of those barrages during the transition phase, but didn't proc cheat death or anything, so he'll still have that available later.
Yeah, one more thing to note is that Drag Captain Lockwood does, of course, have these intermission phases where it's time-based, and after a certain amount of time, she will jump away, you will get the Cannoneers and those ads that you need to get down to get her back. So you need to kill off the Cannoneer to get access to the cannon and shoot her back into combat. Now, if you get 1 extra intermission phase compared to the other team not getting an extra one, that's definitely a pretty huge time save. It's not as big of a deal as like the last boss enshrined, for example, but it still does matter.
And it looks like Dread Captain Lockwood's very high for Black Mamba going into the second intermission. It's at 55% compared to 36% for Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue. They're really going to have to pump out some single target damage during this next phase if they plan on phasing it here. Otherwise, they're going to have to go through another intermission. 36% should get Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue through the next phase just fine. It'll be a little tight. We do see another death for the DK on the side of Black Mamba, sorry, and that is going to be their 1 battle res currently. They'll get another one in about 3 minutes, but they're going to have to pump out some boss damage here. I don't think they're going to get through the phase. Keep an eye on the energy bar at the bottom. When that reaches 100 energy, when that bar fills up, it'll go into the next intermission phase. Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue will get there, no problem. Boss will be finished off before they even get to 3/4 of the way there. But Black Mamba looks like they're having some issues here.
Yeah, having some issues, as you said, and also with the DK death happening, they might not have enough damage, as the boss does drop pretty fast, but you can also see the energy bar filling up pretty fast. If they get another intermission phase, it's going to cost them quite a bit of time, as you can see just the healer in cat form trying to do as much damage as possible to finish it off, but they won't get it. Yeah. They get another intermission, and the boss does not actually die. So some other bosses, if you have dots on them or bleeds or whatever, they will be finishing off the boss. But on this boss, they don't. They do drop the Drag Captain Lockwood low, but it will not actually interrupt the intermission phase. You will have to go through it.
Yeah, they'll have to finish off this Cannoneer, get the shot off, then they can finish off the boss. That's just another 30-40 seconds on the board for them that, you know, wouldn't be there should they have been able to finish the phase off. And honestly, I mean, maybe they didn't rebuff the Unholy DK. That could have done it for them as well. There's a lot of things that could have gone better there for them. Buff Order Rogue has already finished their first trash pack with the Cannoneer, and we're probably going to see something similar once this Demolisher goes down to what we saw last time. A big double pull with that Sigil of Misery, keeping all the ads locked in place while they let the spotter do his work.
Wait, did they have the DK die again on Black Mamba side because the Druid was playing cheetah form and wasn't able to carry them over the bridge?
Man.
I think that's actually what happened again, right? The DK was dying with on the skip earlier. Anyway, it's just such a weird thing that maybe he forgot. I don't know, but anyway, the cheetah form of the Druid is a glyph that you can use to change your travel form. Now, on cheetah form, you can't actually have a buddy jump on your back. If you have the stack form, which is the normal form, you can have a friend of yours jump on the back, and then you're going to be able to carry them. Now, with Wild Charge, you're going to be able to carry a person with the stack form Wild Charge over this bridge area, and DKs and Windwalkers can't usually get over there by themselves. So usually those Druids will have the stack form, the Windwalker and the DK will jump on their backs, and then they will carry them over without the need of them having to die. But Black Mamba is, you know, having this DK die all the time because the Druid has cheetah form, so he can't carry them. Huge, I mean, I don't know, just mistake, but I'm not thinking about this at all.
And Black Mamba's first pull here is not going well at all. They're all spread out all over the place. Tank just dies as well. He'll be able to release since he released right where the second boss died, but that's just going to change. Excuse me, sorry. Allergic to bad pulls. That's just going to change. That's going to make the aggro problem a huge problem here, where the ads will be spreading out all over the place, and maybe the rogues can tank it with riposte for a little while, but this is not a clean pull at all. DK goes down again, bringing them up to 4 deaths. We do have 4 deaths on the side of Buff Order Rogue as well, but they've already gotten through most of this difficult trash, and they'll be able to use the Misery for the rest of these spotter pulls too.
They actually had some trouble here again. So the last time around we saw Buff Warrior Rogue do this exact same pull. They also struggled with this. They had all the Buccaneers just line up, and then we saw the Sigil come out of the Demon Hunter. It worked perfectly for them up until the point where the Sigil broke or it ran out. I'm not completely sure. Either way, they were not succeed anymore. The artillery did not finish them off, and then you just have those deaths coming out just because of the sheer amount of Buccaneers casting so much CC, so many bananas, just causing so many problems for those melee. But they did manage to finish it off now, so good on them, as they are 63% enemy forces trash now, and Black Mamba is on 52%. So now we're going to see some more of this Vengeance Demon Hunter spotter action happening right here.
Yep, they did shadow metal off the trash that just skipped, and like similar to what we saw last time, we're probably going to see double sap, double. We could either see double sap, double blind from the rogues, or we could just see a Sigil of Misery as well for the spotter damage. Both of those work. He's probably saving the Misery for the bigger pull later on afterwards. It does have a pretty significant cooldown, so he's not going to want to use that just yet, but using the single target CC makes a little bit more sense. They're going to let the spotter finish all this trash for them while they keep the Enchanted Emissary away.
Yeah, you can see the snipers here, and this is the perfect positioning being done by Loda. This is what I was talking about earlier when I said you need to be positioned properly to be able to get all of their artillery shots onto the mobs, because if you miss just 1 or 2 shots, I mean, it matters so much. You're going to be so much slower, so you definitely want to make sure that you have everything positioned 100% perfectly. And now we're going to see the boss being pulled, so the whole trash is going to be pulled here. The boss is going to be reset, of course, but if you do aggro the boss, then the whole area is going to run for them. And you also see the rogues, both Supreme and Tomboy, are going to be constantly sapping those Emissary of Tides.
Yeah, meanwhile, on the side of Black Mamba, they are having a lot of troubles with these packs. They're kiting like crazy. Ads are spreading out. They're bleeding deaths. They're up to 9 deaths now. When we last saw them, they were at 4, so hopefully we'll keep an eye on them as well. Hopefully they'll get these trash pulls down. We see the Misery play on the side of Buff or Nerf Rogue. Things aren't quite as perfectly stacked up as they were last time around, so hopefully they'll be able to get these down before that Misery runs out in 5 seconds. It looks like they're not, which is a little bit unfortunate, but you're going to see both Rogues come in after their last sap, and hopefully they'll be able to finish off the rest of the trash in these last spotter explosions, or things are going to get a little bit hairy. Hopefully,
I think they might wipe here.
I mean, there's a chance that they wipe. They'll have only the commanders left. They can battle res the monk, and the rogue can run back. But it looks like they battle res the monk. Supreme release. He's gonna stealth back. Most of the dangerous trash is gone, so it doesn't matter if the Tides emissaries come in. That they were sapped and out of combat, so they're probably not going to be doing that. but all they have to do is cleave down the 2 commanders. Normally what we'd see groups do is they would cleave down the 2 commanders and the 2 Tides emissaries with the spotter and the boss, but like we've mentioned many times, these teams can look at the monitor, they can see that they're pretty significantly ahead in terms of trash percentage and where they are in the dungeon. They can opt to go for the safer strategy if they choose to here, because Supreme is running back, which is what I'm assuming they're probably planning on doing that. They'll probably kill both these commanders here with the spotter, and then they'll actually just pull the 2 Tides emissaries into the boss, or let them come here with the commanders as well.
This was very scary by them, to be honest. They did not manage to... okay, so usually what happens here is that they have both Supreme and Tomboy, both of the rogues, they just constantly stab those Emissary of Tides, because of course, if the Emissary of Tides are on top of the pool, then you can't use your Fear Sigil as a Demon Hunter to see them. So you play this pool as 3 men, with only the rest to do it, the Windwalker and the Vengeance Demon Hunters, while the rogues are off CCing. And then you want to have them all stack up perfectly with the Mass Grip Sigil, and then you want to use the Fear to be able to all stack them up, and them just being basically AFK while using their artillery to get them down from the spotter. But they didn't manage to stack them up properly, so they were all spread out. They were trying to get their artillery on top, but it didn't really work out. And then the rogues had to come back because the Sigil ran out, the Fear ran out, and then it almost caused them to have a full team wipe. But they did manage to recover now. Finally, they're gonna pull some more trash here to get the 100% before they engage with the boss. And as you mentioned, they are probably gonna watch the stream, so they know that they're ahead, and they don't have to do any of those risky plays where they pull something on top of the boss anymore.
Yeah, meanwhile, on the side of Black Mamba, we had another almost full team wipe. Not quite. They kind of bled out a few deaths. The tank went down, the DK went down, one of the rogues went down, and they had to kind of run back to finish off that last trash pack. So they're now up to 13 deaths. It's another 30 seconds on the board in death counters for Black Mamba over before. So not only are they behind in trash percentage and dungeon progression, but they also have an extra 30 seconds on the board that they'll have to get through should they somehow manage to catch up in dungeon progression. And with this spotter going down, putting Buff or Nerf Rogue at 100%, I don't really think Black Mamba is going to catch up in dungeon progression at any point here. This is by far Buff or Nerf Rogue's dungeon to win, and based off of the way they've played most of the dungeons in this tournament, I don't think they're going to be messing anything up here.
I don't never say never, to be honest. Okay, so right now they did pull a Demolisher on accident, but thankfully they are Alliance, so they can Shadow Melt it off. In comparison to Black Mamba, they would not be able to Shadow Melt something like that off. They also still have some more travel here on Black Mamba's side, as they are on 14 deaths at this point with the Rogue going down. Now, before Nerf Rogue, we did mention that they probably know they're ahead, so they can play it a little bit safer. They did finish off the spotter, made sure they got the 100%, made sure everything is completely fine before they did engage Dark Fathom here. We did see some teams actually struggle a little bit on the last boss. We saw them get knocked into the water, getting gripped by the tentacle, almost not being able to finish off the gripping. But again, as you mentioned, Baffour and Nerf Rogue just having such a good performance throughout this whole cup here yesterday and today, that I think they're not going to make any of those huge mistakes anymore.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything I want to see from the Western teams out of, anyone who observed the Eastern Cup here, is that these off-meta picks aren't really that off-meta anymore, especially with the way balance has gone recently. Like, you can make a lot of these picks work. I mean, even Shadow Priest was kind of impressive. He was running Focusing Arrows as a major essence, which seems kind of like a little bit of a patter essence in general, but it works for Shadow Priest because it gives them their haste stat, which is probably one of their higher ranked stats. I believe they're crit haste based as well, so it's just good for them in general. I mean, a lot of things work right now for a lot of dungeons, and I mean, but the problem, of course, is the top 3 teams, they don't really have to innovate too much. It's really kind of up to everyone else to innovate to try to beat the top 3 teams. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see too much innovation out of them. It's going to be the lower ranked teams that have to bring that and try to come up with a better comp than what we've seen the top teams running. But still, I mean, it's impressive to see picks like the Vengeance Demon Hunter do well in this tournament. Yeah,
definitely. I love to see those kind of comp changes in general. Now, I mean, the Rogue problem is probably going to stay this way for quite a while, just because no matter how much you're going to nerf their damage, they still just have this insane amount of utility that they provide, making them so good in those dungeons. And you can't really take their utility just completely away from them. They also need it for stuff like PvP. So it's going to be very difficult to keep rogues in line with any other DPS just because of the sheer amount of utility that they have. And we've just seen it showcased again by Baffour and Nerf Rogue. Just having those 2 rogues constantly stop the Emissary of Tides, they're, I mean, Druids can do the same thing with the Root, but still, just, all of this utility stacking up into one class, making them so good in M+. And Black Mamba, having a full team wipe, I believe.
Yeah, kind of sealing the deal with another full team wipe. If they pulled off that pull and we saw a wipe from Buff or Nerf Rogue on this boss, maybe we could talk a little bit about them coming back in the dungeon. But with that last full team wipe and them committing their Bloodlust to that giant trash pull, I don't think there's going to be any chance of them coming back in this dungeon. They're going to have to make sure they pull that pretty slowly to get through it. And Buff or Nerf Rogue has already dealt with the first platform of Vidgoth here.
Yeah, interesting to see the Lode actually proc the staff here by going out of mana. I'm not sure. I assume it was intended to get the gripping tentacle down a lot faster here in the very first platform. So very heads-up play by Lode, getting the staff proc here with huge single-targeted burst on that gripping tentacle. And then now they're in the second platform. They still have their Bloodlust available. I assume they're going to use this for the last platform. Now, Black Mamba is trying to, pull the whole room with the boss. They know that Buff or Nerf Rogue is on the last boss. They tried to do this Hail Mary play where they just pull everything on top of the boss. Did not work out, obviously. They had a full team wipe again. So all eyes back to Buff or Nerf Rogue as they're fighting the last boss.
Yep, they'll have to deal with this one Demolishing Terror. Then they have their Bloodlust available for the final platform, where more than likely they'll just go pop that Bloodlust Zerg down the final Gripping Terror and be done with the dungeon. This time, it's slower than their time was their first initial Siege of Boralus run was in this tournament. But that being said, they had a couple mistakes. They had 7 deaths. It wasn't clean in the slightest. So, I think it makes sense to see that. But in the end, it was still pretty efficient. I mean, they still got their big pulls done. So, looking forward, I mean, I don't think they play. Do they play Siege? They don't play Siege in the final bracket against Team D. Should they move on, which it looks like they're probably going to, based off of how they played in this dungeon. But just in terms of general efficiency, it looks like they kind of have their strats together so far this tournament.
They definitely do, but Team D, to be honest, I mean, they also played really well, and it was so close between them. So if Buff Warrior Nerve Rogues does end up winning this series, which of course we don't know yet, it's only going to be 1-0 after this one, then I'm just very excited to see the final afterwards. So we'll see how this ends up being with Buff Warrior Nerve Rogue taking the first. Playing this dungeon before, and I'm pretty sure they did play the Fury Warrior as well, so we'll see how it goes this time around. But last time they did struggle quite a bit, especially on these very early pulls. Now, fortunately, the team that they were playing against was throwing even harder than them, so they ended up winning the dungeon. But Buffalo and their Rogue, not a team that typically does throw a dungeon. So Black Mamba has to, they have to play better this time. They can't have any of those huge mistakes. They can't have 20 deaths in this dungeon.
I would say it was a Game of Thrones, but I think that's cutting a little too deep. It's still too soon from when that show ended, so I can't use any of those references. Also, but on the same side, Buff or Nerf Rogue, they lost in this dungeon to AAA as well earlier on in the tournament, and they didn't look good doing so. Actually, Supreme was talking about it afterwards in our guild Discord. He's like, yeah, we didn't practice this dungeon at all. So hopefully they could have had some foresight early on and been like, we might end up playing Motherlode in the lower finals bracket. Maybe we need to practice it a little bit more. So hopefully we'll see a little bit of a more polished strat come out from them here. Otherwise, this could be a very close dungeon.
Yeah, and also a thing to note, if they didn't practice this dungeon at all, there's one thing that could have happened. Buffalo and Nerf Rogue, they know that they almost beat Team D, right? So they know that they're really good. And they saw Black Mamba maybe underperforming a lot of those dungeons, having those huge amount of deaths. So maybe they were saying, you know what, let's just not practice Motherlode, because we're going to be playing against Black Mamba. We know how to play Siege and Tol, which are the other 2 dungeons in this series. So let's just, not focus on Motherlode, because if you go into the lower bracket in the upper final match that we saw before between Team D and Buffalo and Nerf Rogue, then you have to play 2 back-to-back games if you win this one, right? So if Buffalo and Nerf Rogue wins this one, they have to immediately play Team D afterwards. So they might have chosen to prepare for the final instead of preparing against Black Mamba here.
Yeah, and we did, like you mentioned, we have seen both Siege and Tol Dagor from Buff or Nerf Rogue. They were also the first 2 maps that they played in their very first round as well. So we know that they have pretty solid maps in those 2. So maybe you're 100% right. Maybe they're like, well, we can win those 2 maps, so we don't have to worry about Motherlode too much. We'll play it, we'll see what happens, and if we lose it, so what? We should win the other 2 maps. It's definitely a very real possibility. I mean, that kind of reminds me of what the MDI kind of meta was last year.
Yeah.
It was, okay, let's practice the heck out of the first map, and as long as we win the first map, we can win our 3rd pick, because we get to pick our 3rd map, and whatever they pick for the 2nd map, doesn't matter if they win it, because we should always win our pick. That reminds me a lot of that meta, kind of a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. We had so many 3-game series with that meta, with the losing team being able to pick the dungeon and being able to pick an affix even as well. So definitely a difference with this format here. Most of the teams going 2-0 even. We don't see a lot of 3-game series at all this time around. But both Buff Warrior and Black Mamba are at the same trash percentage at this point, right? Both 21%, 0 deaths, so both pretty clean at this point. And of course, both of the teams went back to Alliance as well.
And we're seeing kind of a similar pull style in this dungeon that we've seen almost every single team take this week, just because of the necrotic explosive affixes. You just can't pull that big. You see Ching instantly leaping out when he's only 20-something stacks there, because he doesn't want to have to deal with a large amount of necrotic stacks. But this is a problem that we mentioned on the desk beforehand. When you're kiting around, you're leaving behind those explosive orbs, and your group has to make sure they pick those up, because you're not going to outrange them very easily. You're still going to get hit by them. So it's a very weird problem. On top of that, and we also mentioned this as well on the desk before this match, if they ever wipe and they try to fix it, especially after that first boss, it's really hard to fix those wipes without accruing double-digit deaths because of all the explosive orbs that spawn. It's just a miserable experience. And I think if this had been, if necrotic was a different affix, I think we might have seen Bullstream picked on Twitter. But it makes sense why people picked explosive necrotic. Neither of these affixes are fun in this dungeon.
Yeah, I do think that Bullstream is more difficult, but explosive, maybe for people on live servers that are just padding, explosive seems like a more difficult affix, because usually if you're in a pad group, everyone just thinks, you know what, this is not my responsibility, the other damage dealers are supposed to handle this one. And then everyone thinks this way, and then no one kills the explosives. So definitely a much bigger deal on live servers and in pucks compared to those MDI teams who, of course, deal with the explosives properly. And then on top of that, they also have a lot of rogues all the time, which are just so good at dealing with the explosives in general. So explosive definitely less of a deal for those MDI teams compared to live servers. But both Buff Warrior and Black Mamba seem to be doing well so far. We see percentage-wise, Buff Warrior and Nerf Rogue went ahead.
Yeah, and it's also something important to mention is that usually these rogues, these teams only have one designated orb killer for most of the time, and they'll only call for help if you're doing a massive pack and 5 or 6 explosive orbs spawn. Usually one of the rogues is the one that takes care of most of the explosive orb killing, and the reason it is the rogue is because they don't really lose any damage by swapping to the orb. Their Blade Flurry will still hit everything else on top of the orb, so they don't really lose any damage by doing so, and usually the second rogue will help out if they need any extra damage hitting orbs. It's just kind of efficient damage. You don't want to have both of your rogues wasting GCDs killing something that only takes one button to kill. So just efficiency's sake. So that's why sometimes you see, all it takes is a lapse in judgment from that one person whose job it is to kill explosive orbs, for a team to wipe. It's just these hairline little things, these tiny little things that make a team do very well versus have a full-on team wipe.
I remember the Holy Paladin meta in Legion where Holy Paladins would just kill all of the explosives themselves and the damage dealer wouldn't have to care about them at all, which was really good for all of them, the items, because we all know healer brains are much bigger than DPS brains, so the explosives never went off and killed the group. So well done by the healers in Legion. Good job, Holy Paladins. Unfortunately, we don't see any, or at least not many Holy Paladins this time around in BFA. We saw one last time around, didn't do so well, but hopefully we can see some more healer diversity in the future. We saw some Mistweaver play earlier as well, which ended up working really well. So hopefully something like that in the future too.
Wait a minute, that's not how it was in my team. In my team, the Fire Mage killed them. Are you telling me my healer was lazy?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yo, Lucy,
actually.
where are you? What do you have to say for yourself? He was playing Resto Druid, not Holy Paladin, so it makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, so...
Fire Blast Fire Mage could just use like a mouse over Fire Blast macro for it. They still can actually, but unfortunately we just don't really see that much Mage in tournament play. I think they're pretty solid right now. I mean, we saw them played last weekend, but I just don't think they played around it enough for it to be very good. Hopefully one of these teams can pull out a really great dungeon for Fire Mage. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I'd actually love to see that. I mean, we saw some Mage play happening in Tol Dagor, right? That's the one dungeon where we saw the Mage come out. It never really worked out the way they wanted it to work out, though, so hopefully we do see some more diversity like that in the future. I definitely want to see some more ranged DPS. We saw the Shadow Priest today, so maybe more of that in the future. Hopefully from the western regions as well, which are usually a little bit lazy when it comes to figuring out those kind of things, but we'll see what happens as Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue still ahead in percentage, 58% versus 51%, and again, the percentages can swing quite heavily in this dungeon, so this does not necessarily mean that Buff Warrior is very far ahead, just because those huge pulls that you're doing in this dungeon just swings so much in percentages. One pull can give you up to 10% just just because of the Peacekeepers and how they work with the mech jockeys also giving percentage before they jump into the Peacekeepers.
Based on what they're pulling right now, Buff Warner has 2 Peacekeepers in the pack. So does Black Mamba right now, with one of them about to go down. I think Buff Warner is, pretty slightly ahead right now. It's like you mentioned, it's still kind of hard to say, but it looks like they're doing a very good job kind of just slowly chewing through most of this trash. And I mean, they haven't really had any issues so far. Still 0 deaths on the board for both teams. Not trying to cast your curse. I'm just trying to look at what's happening. Hopefully we don't see a tank go down to one of these charge claws here. That'd be really impressive. Wong, don't do it. No. No, Lipo. Okay, looks like he's safe. Okay. That would have been... Okay. That would have been... I'm not going to get into it. But like you mentioned, they're pretty close. They're pretty close at percentage right now.
Yeah, we see Buff and Nerf Rogue, they do have their Bloodlust ready soon. Actually, both teams do, as both of them did pop their very first Bloodlust on the first trash pool in this dungeon. So they will have their Bloodlust available in 1 minute and approximately 40 seconds. So once the Bloodlust is ready, I assume both of those teams are going to be engaging the boss just so they can get the Bloodlust on Crowd Pummeler here, which, this boss is pretty efficient to use the Bloodlust on, because if you throw the bombs on top of him, then he will get a damage taken increase. So having that Bloodlust on top is very efficient. But Buff and Nerf Rogue heard me and they want to disagree, so they're pulling the boss with still 1 minute and 10 seconds left on Bloodlust, meaning they're probably not going to use it here.
Correct me if I'm wrong, didn't Supreme play Unholy Decay in this Motherlode, in their last Motherlode when they played against AAA? I'm pretty sure he did.
I don't remember.
I'm pretty sure he did. So interesting to see them come up with a different strat. Like, okay, timeout. On the other side, that was an assassin just getting multiple flesh hits off on the entire group, and it had the poison buff. I could see the poison debuff stacking on everyone. That's just a full team wipe. That's just bad interrupt and cooldown management. But it does make sense. Usually we have teams kind of assigning a rogue to each of the assassins, and when you only have one rogue and it's that one person's singular job to do it, and they have to focus on killing explosives, which is probably the rogue's job in this group too. I mean, he's probably getting very overloaded with responsibilities in this group. So I mean, it sucks to see a full team wipe come out of them there, but it does kind of make sense why they would have a wipe like that.
It's actually okay, so I kind of want to know why Black Mamba is running this Fury Warrior in this dungeon specifically, because we know that they can play rogues, right? They can play DKs, they can play other things. So why play the Fury Warrior in this very specific dungeon? I mean, I haven't really paid attention to the damage meter too much. I haven't been staring at it this whole time, so I'm not completely sure if maybe he pops off on those certain pulls, or maybe there's something that he does later on in the dungeon. But utility-wise, Fury Warrior doesn't really bring anything, right? Compared to, I mean, you already have a warrior in your group after all from the prod, so I don't think there's anything very special that he can do. So I wonder what the reason is behind this. So
this is the pull where Buff Warner Folk had their big problem here last time. Their tank got up to about 45 stacks and Necrotic instantly went down. They couldn't kill off the Void Touch Emissary in time. It looks like they pulled 3 less mobs, but their monk does instantly go down to that first Void Touch Emissary explosion, and that might cause them to not kill this before the second hide. They're going to have to make sure they have every cooldown available here. The tank's at 37 Necrotic stacks. He's going to have to kite. They have the Ring of Peace down, but the tank does go down, and this is the problem we were talking about earlier. They're going to have to somehow put this pull back together. I don't know what to say. This is going to be very difficult. They can try LOSing. They have to full LOS until they get into their LOS, and then they somehow have to make sure they can deal with any explosives that spawn from here to the LOS spot around that corner. If they can deal with the explosives, they can put this pull together somehow, but this is still going to be very difficult to pull off.
Oh, this is the exact same thing that happened earlier, just having this pull that they're doing. I really do not understand why they're going through this risky pull with the Void Touch Emissary if you can just avoid the Emissary and just walk past it without pulling it. Maybe they just didn't find the percentage otherwise in the dungeon, but lots of teams just walked by the Void Touch Emissary and ended up getting enough percentage anyway. So I just do not agree with this pull. This seems way too dangerous, just having this Void Touch Emissary, and the Emissary needs to die so quickly, so which makes it so much more difficult, even though you do have the Bloodlust, but you also have explosives all over the place, right? So someone needs to deal with the explosives, and whoever that person is, they might not be able to do as much damage to the Void Touch Emissary as they're supposed to. And then on top of that, you have the tank, which just needs to try and stay alive, so the tank can't do as much damage, and the healer needs to heal. Then you basically only have 2 damage dealers who are trying to deal with this Void Touch Emissary, and even just getting a second cast off meant that one person died. I believe it was Marito who died.
Yeah, I mean, the Monk is probably the worst person to die because he probably hits his Touch of Death on the Void Touched Emissary to make sure it dies, and he probably died in the Touch of Death, meaning the damage wouldn't go off, and they lost a lot of their single target focus damage on the Emissary, meaning the second cast went off. Also, Ching dropping very low to that Rock Lance, and then Necrotic is ticking on him. He's got 25 sacks of that. He does have HOTS, so he probably won't go down, but that's just still spooky to see. He has the Necrotic off, so he can be healed now. Just a little spooky as well. As long as they deal with the explosive from these trickling mobs, they'll be fine, but everything's low enough to where it looks like they have this under control. I was going to say credit where credit's due. It looked like they cut down on the pole. They left the 3 mobs in the back on their own. They didn't deal with the patrol either. I mean, this could have been a thing that, normally it goes okay in practice, but, just something went wrong on stream again. There's nothing you can do about that.
To be honest, I think they literally just did not put a lot of practice into this dungeon at this point, because let's be honest here, when you compare the other dungeons from Buff Warrior of Rogue, their strategy and their execution in those other dungeons was just so much better compared to what they're showing in this Motherlode. So maybe it really is true that they were just not putting enough time into Motherlode, and they're just trying to go through it as best as they can. Now, they did recover pretty well. I mean, they do have 8 deaths on the board, right? But if you compare it to some other teams that had 16 or even more deaths on this very specific wipe, they did recover quite well. So kudos for them to recover and be able to finish off this pull without having 20 or more wipes. So at this point, they're still, I would say they're still ahead to Black Mamba. They do have 2 more deaths, so it's definitely a lot closer this time around. Never mind, 1 more death. But yeah, Black Mamba catching up a little bit.
Looks like Black Mamba's opting to go for the safer pull where they don't deal with the Void Touched Emissary at all. I think my favorite iteration of the strategy that I saw from any teams, one of the Western teams used a Rogue to pull the 3 mobs next to the Void Touched Emissary, pulled it around the corner. Once the tank had aggro, they vanished off the aggro of the Void Touched Emissary. Then they just pulled everything else, completely ignoring the Void Touched Emissary. That's my favorite iteration. They cleaved those 3 mobs with the boss, by the way. They didn't just kill them on their own, so it was pretty efficient in general. I mean, I haven't yet seen something that's more efficient than that, other than actually pulling off this Void Touched Emissary pull that we've seen them wipe to twice now. I don't think we're going to see very many teams attempt that, because it just looks dangerous in general, and it's probably not the best strategy to do. So, especially after wiping to it twice this week, they'll probably go back to the books and try to figure something new out. Trash count for them, I don't think this is going to get them to 100%. It's going to get them pretty close, though. I mean, I could be mistaken. I could just be, a caster that doesn't know what they're talking about. But, sometimes you just got to make things up, Nakura.
Did you even do a +10 key on live servers, Saro, at this point? I mean, I don't know.
Normally when you do a group and someone does a Motherlode key, you kind of put that in the back of your mind and you go do the Tol Dagor or the Freehold, the easy keys, or the Tol Dagor. Okay, I was right. I made it up, but I didn't make it up. 97%. We did it.
You're right, though. Motherlode is one of those keys, especially if you have bad affixes for it. You're just like, you know what? Let's not do that. Let's do a better key. Especially if you get stuff like explosive, bolstering, necrotic. Those kind of affixes make Motherlode just so difficult. And this is why even those MDI teams are struggling. Of course, those MDI teams are pulling a lot bigger than you would in a pug or on live servers. So that's just even increasing the difficulty even more for those teams. As you see, Black Mamba still struggling with those packs that we saw Buff Warrior and Rogue struggle with earlier. And you can just see those teams, once the tank needs to start kiting, everything just falling apart, just because the mobs are spreading out, you have this area of denials, the bombs on the floor, and if you miss one interrupt, someone can just get one-shot at this point, especially with explosives spawning all over the place as well. So Black Mamba did manage to finish it off now, but at this point they're on 13 deaths. And 2 minutes ago, I said that they're on 6 deaths. So they acquired 7 deaths here just on this trash pack alone.
Did they warp time? I mean, if you get more than 12 deaths in less than a minute, do you... Okay, never mind. It's too late for this kind of stuff. Azarok at 20% for Buff Warrior Rogue. They do have the final 2 Earth Ragers spawn for them, but they're just not going to deal with them. They're going to piece them away. They're focusing the boss down. They don't care about those at all, even if they're empowered. They got their Ursul's Vortex down. They're good to go. Also, even if they really want to, they're both fixated on Tomboy. He can kind of just vanish them off or do something else. He can run off into the corner and let the other DPS deal with the boss. So Azarok will be going down for Buff Warrior Rogue. And outside of that one kind of disastrous pull for them, everything else has been pretty clean. It hasn't been fast by any means, but, it's been slow and steady for them.
It's true. I mean, let's say you Buff Warrior Rogue and it's a Motherlode, a dungeon that you haven't practiced too much, probably. At least I assume so, because their strategy didn't seem necessarily fast, and they also did have some issues. So if you're buff warrior rogue and you go into this dungeon without a lot of practice, what you're gonna do, you're probably just gonna go as slow as possible or as big as possible while still being comfortable without having a lot of practice, right? And it seems like buff warrior rogue is doing a pretty good job at that, let's be honest here, because if you don't practice a dungeon like Motherlode, which is so difficult, especially with those affixes, thanks Twitter, then doing what buff warrior rogue is doing here is pretty good still.
I guarantee you the way this goes in comms is, oh, we're only 97%. What do we need for 3%? I think a mastermind is enough, Trash. Pull that. Wait, we're not at 100% still. Okay, we'll pull those rats over there. We'll get them to 100? Okay, got them to 100.
They calculated it properly.
Maybe they popped open MDT just to make sure, that's definitely a possibility. They could, they're at 100% now, so they can just finally go boss to boss here, and they'll have their bloodlust up in about 2 minutes as well. They'll be shadow melding all of this off hopefully. It should be fine. Yeah, they'll be shadow melding all of this off. No reaping mobs to come through because reaping isn't in the game anymore. I'm kind of missing that one little Risen Soul pop through and keep them in combat for an extra cleave target for Rix the Flux Flame,
Right, fallen ones.
Nostalgic.
I miss reaping too. I miss Bomb Salami. It's very unfortunate that he's not here anymore with us. But buff warrior rogue, they are fighting Rix the Flux Flame. We did talk about this boss quite a bit. Usually it's not the most difficult thing. Actually, they did make a mistake right here, as the debuff that gets applied to the two closest targets did go on the wrong people, so they didn't have the defensives ready for that one. But they're just fine, as it is a 45 dungeon, so not a huge problem. If you even if you have the debuff on you, loaded just fine to heal the debuff away. Otherwise, you're going to use the Spell Reflect, of course, from the warrior to just completely negate the debuff at all, or use the cloak from the rogues to just not get it applied on you.
You know what class is really good for this boss, Nungara?
Shadow Priest.
Okay, but a class that's actually okay. The Shadow Priests are pretty good. I was going to say Warlocks. I mean, they're just as relevant as Shadow Priest. Actually, less relevant because we've actually seen a Shadow Priest in tournament play. Warlocks. Yeah,
Sorry?
Warlocks. Yeah, the other purple. You said purple was your favorite color. The other purple.
Oh, but it's the brighter purple. That's not as pretty as the Demon Hunter purple.
Whatever.
I mean,
they take our color. They take our metamorphosis. What else are they going to take from us?
I'm a big fan of Warlocks, to be honest, just because they have all those very beautiful animations, and I feel like other classes did get robbed from the animations that Warlock has. I feel like Warlock has way too many good things. I mean, they might not be good at M+, but they look really cool.
And they're always good in raids, like always good in
Yeah,
raids.
that is true.
So, they've got that going for them. I kind of miss the old days of Legion M+, where you could just throw on the slow ring and then just be completely relevant always. That was really fun.
Remember. I almost forgot about that. Not OP at all, slow ring. The whole kiting strategy, I remember.
It's pretty skill-based, honestly.
Definitely. How to just jump in and the tank just runs away and none of the mobs do anything. And that was a really good strategy for tanks too. They definitely loved that strategy, especially because they didn't do anything other than running away. So I definitely heard about that one before. From now, for example, did love the kiting strategy. Now, buff warrior rogue, let's go back to this dungeon, as they're very far ahead. They are on the last boss. They have the 100% enemy forces. All they have to do now is finish off this last boss. They also have a bloodlust available, so it really should not be a big deal. None of the affixes are going to affect this boss, since we have fortified. Necrotic does affect it a little bit, but usually this boss does do a lot of casting, like the Gatling gun you can see right now. So lots of time for the tank to reset the necrotic stacks, and there's not that many that's happening here either, except in the intermission phase, so explosive not going to be a deal as well.
This kind of reminds me, this boss reminds me a lot of all of the bosses they put the ready for raiding achievements on. I don't think there was one for this, right? It seems like it's a missed opportunity. It would have been like ready for raiding 6 or something, where don't get hit by any of the boss's abilities, because this is definitely one of those bosses. All of the abilities are pretty much ground mechanics that you can easily dodge, unless you are the only healer/range person in the group. You'll always get targeted by the missile, unfortunately, which is why you see the healer pre-moving out for that. But other than that, dodge the spots on the ground, dodge the Gatling gun, everything is dodgeable. So it seems like it's perfect for that kind of achievement. Come on, Blizzard, you should have put that in.
I agree. Blizzard. We can add it in right now.
Hey, Zyro. I didn't mean
hey,
to
Jack, we're still casting, okay?
I just want to hop in 1 second here, because that's literally the achievement.
Oh, it is?
Is it actually on there? Okay, hey, it's late.
They lack critical information.
It's 4 a.m. Come on, I didn't know it was actually part of it. It's fine. Okay.
Keep doing your thing. Keep doing your thing.
All right, we're casting. Back to the casting.
Now I know who didn't get the achievement.
How about you cast for us, Jack? Come, cast the final.
All right, through the intermission for Buff or Nerf Rogue, just dealing off
you,
with the final
Jack?
Sky Scorcher. He's the host. I'm the caster,
Jack,
Nagura.
cast him.
I'm the caster. They have one more pillar to get through to get through the intermission phase, and the Bloodlust has popped for them. I mean, they're pretty firmly in the lead right now. Black Mamba just now finishing off the third boss, so this should be a quick 2-0 for Buff or Nerf Rogue. And like we mentioned, they probably don't have that much practice in this dungeon. It's the fact that they didn't practice this dungeon very much, but they are still winning the dungeon against Black Mamba kind of shows, how good of a team they are. And hopefully our next series between Buff or Nerf Rogue and Team D is going to be as good as the previous upper finals was, because that was a fantastic series to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say about this series anymore, because Buff or Nerf Rogue is really on another level compared to Black Mamba, because as you mentioned, just not practicing for this and still 2-0ing Black Mamba. I don't know. I'm just very excited to watch.
Out of jail, but getting ready right away with the Sanguine pull here. No unholy DK to be seen for either side. We do know some of the teams enjoy the massive pulls coming up right off the bat on top of Sanguine, so likely a lot of heavy cannon play coming up, but we haven't seen Team D do this dungeon at all. Team D has been an absolute pleasure to watch so far. Both teams at the exact same second with that Bloodlust, Zyro.
Yep, and similar pulls, one pack of the crabs plus one of the crocs. It's the same thing we've seen from almost every team in this tournament. I think we had one Western team pull 2 crab packs and a croc, and they ended up having a couple deaths because of it. So this is kind of the safe strategy. And no delay on the list either for 2 teams, like you mentioned. Exact same time. So similar strategies, but way more damage coming out of Team D on the boss here.
Yeah, Team D is just throwing everything they have at this boss. Upheaval finally coming up here for the team right now. Big hit in the back there. We do know, of course, that's nature damage. And just tip for those at home, for those that don't know, any high mobility classics can actually dodge that upheaval. So whether you have a Transcend or Heroic Leap, if you time it correctly, you can just completely dodge that massive nature damage hit. No problem with these two teams right now. As Team D is at 50% on Sand Queen, 4% trash. Matching Buff and Nerf, 4% trash, but just vastly out DPSing them for single target. 15-16% difference between the two. Now, with this dungeon, kind of looking forward to it, we do know there's a couple of very dangerous choke points outside of course, the cannon play, which we'll see. Really, before that comes Jess Howell's room. We've seen a lot of issue there for the teams, especially with either Sanguine, which we don't have here, but we do have Explosive. That's the other big telltale sign of disaster coming in on the Jess Howell's floor.
Yeah, I think if we had like a heat map of every single dungeon of where team deaths occur, that tiny little corner of Jess Howell's room would be like the most brightly colored portion of any of the dungeons, because we've just seen so many wipes, specifically to Explosive in that corner before. There's so many trash mobs there that teams end up pulling that, one missed kick can just snowball out of control for these teams.
Snowball indeed. A big crab pull coming in here for Team D as they grab some more trash on top of the Sand Queen, looking to be as efficient as possible. Really like seeing them do this, but Buff or Nerf Rogue, like they read their mind, does the same thing on their side. Unfortunately, still has 15% left on this first boss to go before they are able to move on. Team D has now dealt with the boss, is finishing up the rest of this trash. A bit of mismanagement here with the trash pull. You obviously want to ideally finish everything together, but well thought out by Team D as they get ready to cleave the rest of this down and likely do a pretty substantial skip on the way up to Jess Howell's floor. But yeah, I see what you're talking about, Zyra. That's not looking good right there.
Yeah, that's a dead character at the end of a boss. That happened in the Siege of Boralus too.
Why are they running a dead rogue? There's 2 rogues, there's a dead rogue, and the other team's also running a green rogue with 2 rogues.
That's really weird. I mean, I was looking at your Twitter account earlier today, and you posted
Which one?
The public one,
Ah, yes.
And you tweeted how many rogues you think we're going to see, 18 or 19 plus. I voted for 19 plus, but I don't think there actually are 19 different DPS classes available in the tournament, so maybe I'm the wrong one. I don't know.
Sorry, you're never wrong. You're just lovely. The team here moving in, Buffware and Nerf Rogue getting all their CC ready and just breaks through the floor under Jess Howell's floor right away. Excuse me. Shadow Meld coming in from the team right, and they move up right past this Enchanted Emissary. Now, this Arsonist on the side, oftentimes we see teams pull later if they deal with Jess Howell's pulling through the door, or really just phase 2 Jess Howell's as Team D's already moved up and dealing with a bunch of explosives on the side here, getting some damage in. Now, we've seen Buff War, I think, run this dungeon already yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, and they opted for a more cannon-heavy play, if I remember correctly, whereas Team D we haven't seen. We've seen kind of 2 different strategies coming out of teams in general since the cannons were nerfed. One is obviously still to try to focus on the cannons and get as much out of them as possible, whereas some other teams have opted to try to clear 40 to 60% trash without the cannons and focus less on the cannon play. Of course, if you can still make the cannon work, it's highly efficient, as we saw, for instance, with Method EU last week.
Yeah, from what we've seen most of this tournament, most of the teams have opted to just almost completely copy Method EU strategy, like we mentioned. Tettles mentioned it, I mentioned it. You clear out the entire walkway, then you pull the entire top floor of the dungeon and pull it into the first cannon, use all your shots there, then pull to the second cannon, use 2 or 3 of the shots there to finish everything off. That's kind of the predominant strategy we've seen from most teams. It might not be the best one. We might see someone else come up with something different in the West Cup next week just to kind of finish off the dungeon. Method EU actually posted a 13:01 time for their Tol Dagor time trials, so I'd love to see what they have figured out for the dungeon too. Maybe they just cleaned up their act a little bit with their cannon shots. Maybe the Global Elite got a little bit better. But both teams phasing Jess Hallis into Phase 2 at almost the exact same time, same percentage on the boss there. Team D, 2% extra trash, but that's not, that big of a deal in the dungeon.
Yeah, the old cannons upstairs. Unfortunately, there for Team D, they got stunned right as the explosive spawn, so they had to eat the explosive to the face. Fortunately, everybody was nice and healthy, so no casualties on their side. Really cool to see from both teams here. Just a very similar, almost equivalent strat coming out of both of them, pulling Just Hallis through that wall, doing the second phase here, tanking in the same spot, trash percentage almost equivalent as you mentioned, boss percentage, just within 2% of each other. So this is a heck of a match that we have going on here. Excuse me, Twitch chat, for the profanity. I didn't mean that one. Team D, 53% on Just Hallis, but they're starting to run away with this one for Buffware and Nerf Rogue. That 2% gaps actually opened up just a fair bit, but it seems that Team D has had their second round of cooldowns. I do see the adrenaline rushes on the Rogues just recently re-popped, so they've managed to close the gap and actually surpass Buffware and Nerf Rogue here.
Ooh. Looks like, they're also ahead on Bobby damage, too, which is very impressive. As we know, whoever does most damage to Bobby is the winner, so keep an eye on those percentages there. They may not win the dungeon, but in my mind, they won the dungeon because, Bobby's a criminal. That's why he was locked up in jail.
That's true, Zyro.
That is true. Just like, I don't know what you were talking about when I broke out of jail. I've never been there in my life. Team D finishing off Jess Hallis, while Buff4 still has 10% left on the HP there. So they're a little bit ahead in this dungeon. They've also got the percentage advantage. Don't have the percentage advantage anymore. Misspoke. They do have a couple mobs to finish off here. That Arsonist will probably make up the 2% that Buff4 has an advantage on them with. But, Buff4 did something at the end there with Trash that gave them a little bit of an advantage. Instantly, speed popped, and they're moving onto the top floor. We're going to see them start clearing up that platform for the cannons.
Clearing out the platform, indeed. I expect to see similar play from both teams, clearing out the entire balcony first and then using the 10 shots total, 2 times 5 shots from the cannons for the remainder of a large pull on the floor. It's really going to come down to how well they control them. One of the nice plays that I liked seeing in the West last week was that the rest of Druids actually ran Mass and Tangle in order to keep those mobs rooted in place for 1 to 2 cannon shots. Both of these Druids here are running Typhoon, however, so a bit less control there, but Uclap going down here for Team D, spoke a bit too soon, and finally he gets the res up, but I think that was actually a purposeful death, or just didn't manage to get the skip. He did use his Shadow Meld, so I think that might have been a bit of a boo-boo there. Did not manage rather to get the skip in. Fortunately, they didn't have to use their Battlers on that. Revitalize was already being precast by Av, so they communicated well that this would happen. Immediately res the tank, and off they go. They're 3% behind Trash on Buffware and Nerf Rogue, who's taken a slight lead here on the Trash, but they're still neck and neck, and whatever advantage Team D had in terms of the 0 deaths has now been equalized at 1 apiece.
Yeah, but I think really where we're going to see these teams pull ahead, or one of the teams pull ahead significantly here, is going to be how well they deal with these cannon shots. Both of them are going to do similar pulls here where they pull all of this trash on top of each other, efficiently cleave it down after LOSing around this corner. Team D is very likely going to do almost the exact same thing, but it's really going to come down to how efficiently they can stack everything up. And I kind of agree with you. Running Typhoon in this dungeon seems kind of like a mistake when you can keep everything stacked for just one of those cannon shots. If you can make sure everything gets hit, that's a huge boon.
It doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's a huge deal. It's not even that. You keep them steady for one shot. The one shot breaks it. Everything's still grouped together. You probably get 2 to 3 nice, stable shots with this Mass Root, as opposed to the Typhoon, which will likely only affect some of the front runners in the pack. And both teams do have that Ring of Peace, which is an extremely useful tool for getting everything grouped up together in the first place, and then using the Ursals and Mass Root on top of it. But that is Dreamland. We do not have the Mass Entangles available from these two tunes. Tomboy's getting quite a chunk hit there. No proc on the cheat death for Buff Warrior, Nerf Rogue, so they kind of get through that one unscathed. The 2 Rogues, on the other hand, for Team D have both do not have that cheat death available, so quite vulnerable for, well, at least another 5 minutes for the second Rogue, and Mog has about, I'd say, 3.5 minutes left on his. Team D now getting ready to pull the rest of the trash here on the balcony as Buff Warrior and Nerf Rogue still cheese through theirs. They're just about a pack ahead of Team D right now.
Looks like Team D opted opted, instead of pulling all of it together, to do 2 smaller pulls, just be a little safer, make sure things got stacked up a little more quickly. So even though it looks like they're kind of at the same point, Buff War Nerf Rogue, after they finish off these last 2 or 3 mobs here, will be ready to start grouping things up and get into that corner. You know, I just kind of thought of something. Why don't they use Ring of Peace to knock all of the mobs into a corner to keep them in place? Wouldn't that be kind of interesting? I mean,
are you talking about the pull here in the hallway?
Yeah, no. Whenever they stack everything up, they
right.
maybe that's what the Druid knock is for. Maybe the Druid can knock them into a corner, and then they can use the Ring of Peace to keep them there. I know Ring of Peace does have a bounce cap, though. It can only bounce a certain number of times before the mobs will just run through it. So maybe that's what.
I think the cap's very high if that's the case, because what they do here is they usually put the Ring of Peace down in the doorway,
right,
and then everything tries to funnel, and we'll see it here in just a moment for Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue. At least I assume that's what they're going to do in order for there it is. So everything tries to funnel in and then group up nicely, and then we're going to see the Ursul's Vortex go down right after that. And well, I guess the Typhoon is what's going to come after. They don't have the Mass Root here as a Ching BB pops his Spell Reflect. I'm not really sure why though, because there's no cast going on him unless he's planning to get that sneaky Reflect on the cannon back into the face of Supreme. Load unfortunately getting clipped by a couple of the explosives. Last thing you want to see right now is your healer going down. They don't have a Battle Res available, and Supreme takes a hit from the explosives. Cheat Death procs and he goes down. Things are starting to unravel here from the weave of Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue as they jump over to the far cannon and try to keep things under control. Team D is just now preparing their big pull.
The Supreme Death was totally on purpose, though. He stayed in the cannon. The second he popped his Cheat Death, he popped out, popped his cloak, and then went back in so he could take as many of those explosives to the face as he could. And then he just kind of got one last shot off right before he died, using all 5 of the shots. He did his job. The death was on purpose. I mean, they could have played maybe a little safer with their stacking, but it looks like Supreme is going to go down inside, messing up the skip again. That's definitely not intended.
This is not what you want to see if you're a Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue fan right now. The team is starting to fall apart. Loda has gone down yet again, has not released Supreme has already gone down twice. Man, trying to stay just afloat right now. Tomboy's about to go down at 2%, goes down. The Grievous is just taking these guys down, and there's just no healer to compensate for it. 1 death over on the side of Team D right now from the Rogue. They sit at 3 deaths. Looks like both teams having a bit of issue with sloppiness, but certainly much more in favor of Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue from the sloppy perspective.
That seemed like an early shot from Mob there. There was nothing stacked up. He just shot the officers in front. That seemed very premature, and as we do know, these cannons only have 5 shots now, so they very likely are only going to use 1 more shot from this cannon once the mobs are stacked up. Maybe 2 if they're feeling a little bit, if they're feeling themselves, but it looks like we have a full-on wipe on the side of Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue at this point.
Yeah, it's not looking good, and that Ring of Peace was placed down really poorly. Full team wipe coming in here from Team D as well. 7 deaths on the board, 7 deaths on the board for Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, and just like that, things have equalized again as both teams, at least the healers both teams, have released, and they're trying to run back up as quickly as possible to get started again on the balcony. 79% trash done for Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, however, only 53 for Team D.
Yeah, Team D can't let this reset, right? They've used their cannon shots on all of this trash, and the trash is at 20%. Most of the trash is at 20 to 40%. If they let this reset, all of their cannon shots are gone, and they went into nothing, essentially. So they have to try to keep this together, and it looks like this is all going to completely reset and heal back to full, and the cannon's gone for them. They have to deal with all this trash without the cannon. That's catastrophic.
This is a huge issue for them. I don't even know if they're going to make this key in time for the weekly +10 right now, but Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue at the 79%, standing tall and mighty. Despite their full team wipe, they did fortunately manage, at least in favor of them, Zyra, they managed to wipe after most of the trash was already dead, so they didn't have the situation that Team D did here, just having most of the trash reset at around 10 to 20% mark. So Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, again, if nothing happens, they're in a huge position to win here. And just as I say that, Supreme goes down one more time. Zyra, you're going to have a talk with him.
He's going to get a talking to for sure, man. Let me tell you. I mean, as a fellow Warlock player, I feel like I'm kind of in charge of him, and seeing him die to explosives over and over again, you got to shoot the explosives. I know you're in the cannon, Supreme. Jump out, pistol shot, crit. You're going to be good to go, or at least yell at your team.
Pistol shot, crit. Just crit whenever you want.
Just crit. Yeah, that's all you got to do.
Team D here still. Team D is actually in a horrible position right now because they know, I mean, if any team in this East Cup, they know the position they're in. They have to take it slow, and they have to chew through this trash brute force, and just normally they don't have the cannon available. There's no cooldowns they're waiting for. They just messed up their opportunity, something that Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue's coin flip of a disaster turned out on the positive side. So they've managed to chew through what they needed to chew through. They're at 89% right now. That's the percentage they need before they finish off the last 5 mobs plus the Void Emissary leading up to Korgus. So Knight Captain Valyria here, 80%, third boss of the dungeon for Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, sitting at the percentage trash they need, and they're just in a prime spot to take this first map off of Team D.
Yeah, I mean, it really can't be said how big of a deal it is that Team D essentially lost all of their cannon shots. That's 20 million damage that they lost based off of just pure cannon damage alone. I think they only have 2 or 3 shots left in this far cannon, so that's not anywhere near enough to help them out with this massive trash pull that they have left to do. Although they might try just to help them, kind of pepper in some extra damage. But I'm not really sure how they're going to get back on this dungeon at this point. They have to really pull off something crazy.
Yeah, I mean, they can't. There's nothing miraculous they can do in here outside of hoping that Buffware Nerf Rogue has a tough time and has a wipe on something coming up. And even if they have a wipe once they kill Knight Captain Valeria, they're going to have a really nice checkpoint at the 3rd boss, which they'll be able to recover from in a much more efficient manner than wiping to the cannons on the balcony and going all the way down to just House's floor.
I mean, you say that, but there were also multiple times in the last Eastern Cups where Team D was in Tol Dagor and they were behind and all they needed was a wipe from the other team, and it's like the angel of Tol Dagor came down and said, you know what, Tol Dagor TD, Team D TD, you know what, we'll throw you a bone and wipe the other team for no reason. There you go. But I mean, it's going to take like 3 of those for Buffware Nerf Rogue to mess up that much to where Team D can come back on this one.
At least, and as if there's anybody who could do it, it's this Void Emissary right now that they just jumped in the middle of with the 2 casters on either side. Of course, these Ashvane Priests, they are both blinded and have been bumped away. They have to kill this Emissary off before it gets the 3rd cast. Should be no problem for them, as they did well to sap the Warden on the side, double blind the Priests out of the way, and bump them with the ROP, so they have no incoming damage outside of the cast from this Void Touched Emissary. Nice and safely get it down, and then they will combine the remaining 5 trash mobs under this final cannon's 5 shots, and then head on up to Corgus, which, we always talk about Corgus as always a dangerous boss, blah, 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 but let's be honest, in this fortified environment, it takes away that, it puts it just under that threshold of just being a bit too dangerous. This team should have no problem handling that at this caliber.
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of the state of it. Like we always talked about in Tol Dagor, there was like this looming threat of the final boss being something that could wipe even the best teams if they got really bad RNG, but in the fortified setting, that's just not the case. It's something that you get through more than half of the boss with your Bloodlust, and then afterwards, you just kind of coast through because your healer still has full mana. They've been DPSing the entire time. There's not really anything dangerous going on. So, yeah, we're probably not going to see a wipe out of Buffware Nerf Rogue here, and it's going to be an interesting series because Team D has definitely looked like the better team throughout what we've seen of them in the tournament so far. Buffware Nerf Rogue has had some hiccups, but I mean, they looked way better in this dungeon so far.
Yeah, the scariest thing to me is that Twitch chat was right. They actually voted for Buffware Nerf Rogue, which is just a once in a million years stars aligning kind of thing, but I mean, I guess we're just going to have to, go with the flow here. And so far, Overseer Corgus 80% on the final boss, 80% for Team Buffware and Nerf Rogue. Final boss, Bloodlust has been popped, 10 seconds left on that. There's just no way they're catching at this point, Zyro.
Nope. I mean, they're at the same HP, but they're on the boss beforehand. They're on the wrong boss right now, and they're 10 HP% lower. So maybe if they got randomly teleported to the last boss at the same HP with the trash all done, they could win this dungeon, but it looks like it's going to be all Buffware Nerf Rogue. And I kind of, you sounded a little upset when you said Twitch chat were right. Aren't they always right?
But that's just the thing, sometimes you want to see them be wrong, but you just can't help it. They're always right. Okay. Overseer Krogus here at 40% for Buffware and Nerf Rogue. Obviously, they've already dealt with their trash. Seemingly no doubles coming in for the team, and even if so, just in this fortified environment, they're able to just power heal through the increased range of these rogues, allowing for a nice spread from those explosions and the explosive ammunition. It's just so simple for them to deal with right now. Tomboy's making sure he backs up here so he doesn't get clipped by any of those explosive radius. And it's going to be 1-0 in the series in a second here. Knight Captain Valeria does go down for Team D, but just way too little, way too late.
Way too little, way too late. I mean, that cannon wipe is about as catastrophic as you can possibly get in any of these dungeons. So it's really unfortunate to see them have some sort of wipe that they really can't come back from. I mean, you see them moving on as if they had the trash count, just kind of like they're practicing in tournament play, see if they can get through and they know what they're doing. Maybe they're just kind of showing off that they know what they're doing and they had really one really bad wipe. But it's going to be Buffware Nerf Rogue going up 1-0 in this series going into the next map, and that's got to be a big confidence booster for them.
Yeah, and that's a big Oofington bear for Team D. I mean, they probably coming out of that match, they got to be rattled. So a lot of pressure coming in on this Team D team right now to try and perform and tie up this series. Right off the bat, of course, we see both of the teams with that Mastel going through in a line of sight position and grabbing a rather substantial pull, as we already see Ab pre-positioned on top of that roof so that we can prevent the tank from getting that shattering throw.
Yep, already pre-positioning. He's already going to have to jump down right away. He had the grenade thrown on him, so that pre-positioning already gone for them. But you talked about that Team D. I feel like they're a team that has some pretty good poise. They had to deal with Battle for Champion consistently being the better team throughout all the previous cups, except for that first Eastern Cup where Team D pulled out a victory. And I feel like they've always been able to come back. So for a team that's been this experienced, they've had this many cups where they've come in second or first place, I would hope that one bad dungeon wouldn't rattle them that much. But we're going to have to see how they play here. And already, I mean, they're kiting a lot early on here, whereas Buff Warner Frog, it seems like they're kiting pretty efficiently right now. Things are pretty stacked.
Yeah, pretty efficiently, but Ching is dipping below 20% health constantly. Can't seem to get out of that. No dispel on that poison either coming out of Loda. And of course, there is no disease dispel, importantly enough, on either of these teams, meaning the Bonesaw can just free reign terror with the disease that decreases your healing taken by 20% per stack on these tanks right now. So especially if they pull some of that trash on top of Sky Captain Craig, could be pretty dangerous.
Important to note that both teams have swapped out their green rogue for the red rogue. So
yes, of course.
They'll have the massive AoE damage rogue instead of the slightly okay AoE damage rogue. And on top of that, you know, something that we've seen this week, Unholy DK actually pretty impressive on single target now after the changes. I mean, they were always lagging a little bit behind both rogues and windwalkers in terms of single target damage, but it even seems like they might even be better now after the changes.
I mean, they have been officially promoted to a rogue as a result of that increased damage. Red Rogue has joined the fray. Supreme taking a pretty heavy chunk of damage from Sky Captain Craig. They're dipping to 30% health, but no problem as a bunch of trash is pulled on top of the boss. We've seen this typically from the teams. Both Bloodlusts wearing off on either side just within 1.5 seconds of each other, but this is where some of the danger is going to come in. You could see just now, finally, that disease faded off of Ching because that Bonesaw is in there. So not only do you have to keep an eye on the heal that the Bonesaw does, but the tank takes an increased, well, not increased amount of damage, of course, just for the trash, but just makes it particularly dangerous to heal up, so it puts a bit more pressure on that Resto Druid because warrior tanks pretty much zero throughput in terms of their ability to increase their health compared to most of the other tank classes. So little babysitting needed there from the Resto Druids, but no problem for either team as they're in the teens of percent here, Zyro.
I mean, these teams are once again, it just goes to show how good both of these teams are, how close they are. Only 5% boss damage difference after doing pretty much the exact same trash pulls. It even looked like Team D was a little bit slower on their initial trash pull, but they were able to pull ahead with their efficiency of cleave with their Bloodlust on that trash, and they're able to get down Sky Captain Crag maybe 5 to 10 seconds ahead of Buff War Nerf Rogue. So these teams, I mean, moving on into this kind of open section of the dungeon where you can do whatever trash pulls you want, it's going to be interesting to see what strategies these teams go with to try to pull ahead here.
But the thing is, this is also where things have fallen apart for the teams in Freehold on this East Cup. This is where it gets really nasty just because of the potency of the trash. Teams are very tempted, as we see with live keys, as we see with all forms of keys here in Freehold. High trash density after the first boss, so teams are very tempted, and it is possible to get as much damage in with a very large pull. But because of this raging affix, tanks are so susceptible to just dropping like flies constantly, depending on how many brine scales are in the pack. And not just that, but you have the blind rages going off. You have the whirlwinds from the Buccaneers going off. So even somebody in the group can just randomly drop if you don't keep that CC on raging in check.
You know, I wonder if we're going to see what I had been waiting for all last season. We didn't see it until the final cup. Okay, well, that would be fun to watch too. But, you know, with these Unholy DKs, we always talk about how great it is to pull trash on top of bosses. And I don't think we waited until LAN until we saw an Unholy DK group pull a bunch of trash on top of the bosses. I would love to see one of these teams, you know, make the difference in this dungeon and pull ahead by pulling a massive trash back on top of the Council of Captains. But you got what you wished for. Tank death and a DPS death on the side of Buff Warner Rogue Supreme also going down. They don't have a battle res available for him. It's going to be a full team wipe.
Like clockwork, Chimbigby goes down. That thing is, he waited too long to pop that shield wall. The shield wall came up when he was already at 30% health. I think, at least that's what I saw. I don't know if Tettle's got a better look backstage, but you know, you can't pop shield wall when you're already that low with mobs that are starting to rage and go, oh, this will save me. It's only a 40% DR, so he needed to smooth that damage out earlier. Just too much damage to overcome. And on the side of Team D as well, another full wipe. I mean, Zyro, it's exactly what we were just predicting. This trash is so dangerous. But what makes it even worse is I don't think any of these teams actually wiped to the trash before the majority of raging even hit. So things were about to get even nastier and they weren't able to handle. They just bit off more than they could chew with this pull here. So Team D now has 5 deaths on the board, full team wipe. Ab is running back for the res. Loda has already run back for Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, 6 deaths on the board for them, and they're going to have to get at it again here in a second.
Small advantage for Team D, though. They have 1 less death on top of that. They didn't commit their battle res to that wipe. They just kind of instantly flopped over. Whereas Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, they had a little bit of an opportunity to get the tank up, and they tried to take it, but it just didn't end up working out for them. So they won't have a battle res available for the next 5 minutes, which could, you know, It could mess them up on a boss encounter later on if they don't have the battle res back up for that, so we'll have to keep an eye there. But we're probably going to see them go for a similar pull here, maybe use that defensive cooldown a little earlier. Might go for something safer. You never know.
They can't. Shield Wall's on about a 2.5 minute cooldown for the 2 now. I mean, it's modified by anger management for the 2 warriors, but it's going to take a bit before they get that cooldown up again. So they're doing a much more modest pull. Ching already at half health here as the Knuckle Dusters come in along, I believe, with the Brutes, of course. There are 4 Brutes plus the 2 Knuckle Dusters for the events in order to spawn the Council of Captains here on this tournament realm for this week in order to get Eudora and Jolly active. 21% trash on the board for Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue. Ching BB is, of course, chain slowed now from those Knuckle Dusters just slamming the ground. Supreme taking damage too. Is just splash damage on the group entirely right now as they start to hit the raging area. You only have 1 soothe every 10 seconds. And I frankly don't even know if Loda wants to use the GCD for that soothe as opposed to just pumping heals into Ching BB. But a disaster here already for Team D. Another death comes up for Long right now.
Well, there goes that battle res we were talking about. So no advantage with the battle res anymore for them. Okay, I was talking.
Oh,
you know, I said
you're so modest.
We were talking about it. We were talking about it. It was a conversation we were having during the dungeon. Got to give credit where credit's due. But yeah, no advantage for either team now. Same amount of deaths on the board. Same trash percentage. Same pull they're doing. Okay, Team D's maybe a little bit further ahead on the particular pull, but these teams are neck and neck in where they are in the dungeon right now, and it's just going to be, you know, up to how well they play.
Up to the gods. There's nothing else that can decide this but the gods. Team D now 39%, looking to maybe get ready for a larger pull. Yeah, I see the pack in the back just up the hill there. That is one of the packs that teams often combine with the Brine Scale Patrol, but that's now dead because Team D took it a bit slower, a bit more modest of a pull here as they try to get rid of this Enchanted Emissary, and I'm not really sure what they're looking to combine just yet, or if they're looking to just go straight boss here. They might be going straight boss as Team Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue is at 40% trash. They finish off their pull too. Their Enchanted Emissary has already been dealt with, and they're getting ready to likely pull the boss Tomboys with a random death at the very end there.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, fortunately, it wasn't during a pull, so they're able to just quickly res them up, but that's an extra 5 seconds on the board plus the res timer. And they are pulling these yellow mobs with the boss, which is, they're just going to die pretty quickly, so it's not going to be really a boss damage increase for them. Maybe we'll see them pull something else with the boss as well. I'd be really surprised if they don't, because you kind of want to take advantage of that Unholy DK plus that rogue damage. It is Eudora, however, and you see a lot of damage coming out, and like we mentioned, that's a DPS down with no battle res. With the bosses at the percentage that they're at, I'd be really surprised if they don't reset this right now.
I mean, we haven't seen them reset earlier either, but it looks like Ching is running out indeed. They opt to reset it, so we'll call it their Zyra. But man, oh man, this is just so much time lost. 8 deaths on the board right now. They had to reset the boss, I guess, fortunately early, if we're talking about just the worst case scenario that we could possibly discuss here. Team D is now dealing with Captain Jolly and Captain Eudora as well. They're at around 85% average between the 2 bosses, as Eudora did have the worst RNG possible and leap to that diagonal opposite corner of where the team is tanking the bosses. Fortunately for them, the Rat Trapper was not there yet, so no social or proxy aggro from that trash that we saw in the series earlier happened for them. Team D once again looking like they're in the prime lead here, as they're at 6 deaths versus the 8 for Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, 49% trash versus 42, and certainly lower on this boss already, averaging 60% between the 2 versus around 70 for Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue.
The thing that I'm worried about for these teams is if Eudora jumps to that corner you're talking about with the rat pack there, does it also pull the Void Touched Emissary as well? No, it doesn't. Okay, because that could be a problem, because that Void Touched Emissary reaches the entire boss arena. There's no way you can dodge any of those attacks. There's no LOS spots except for like that tiny pillar on the side of the platform. So they'd have to deal with that Void Touched Emissary. That'd be really unfortunate for them. I don't think we've mentioned the buff in this particular dungeon. They are getting that 15% damage buff barrel instead of the random buffs and random boss damage buff as well. So really no RNG for the 2 teams here, just that damage buff in general.
Yeah, just the damage buff, but the irritating thing is it has a huge area, but you can see exactly what I was about to describe here on the side of Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue. The area denial that comes in from Jolly's Whirling Blade is quite irritating, not only to absorb in the boss, but it pretty much just denies the area for that barrel trying to get in. The tank does have to stand around there, and the melee obviously need to get to the boss to DPS. So one advantage that ranged would have there, ironically, or as ironically, if you will, is to just be able to sit there in that area from the barrel and just DPS freely without worrying about the blade. But no such thing exists. They were extinct decades and decades ago, as Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue now finally gets down to Jolly only, 30% on the boss. Team D already dealt with the second boss, has popped their mass stealth, and is heading over towards Trothak's Ring of Booty.
Yeah, we see a little difference in strategy here from both teams. Team D opted to almost almost evenly DPS both Eudora and Jolly down, whereas Buff War Nerf Rogue very, very much focused Eudora down. Jolly was still at 50% when Eudora died, but instead of just single targeting Jolly down, they opted to pull an entire trash pack on top of Jolly. Team D did opt to pull more things. Ooh, little scary moments from Buff War Nerf Rogue as Jolly goes down. That could have been really bad if the healer went down. Fortunately, boss goes down. They do access that checkpoint, and they're only just slightly behind Team D in terms of the dungeon. They do have to run over to the Ring of Booty as well, but they do also have those 2 extra deaths on the board.
A bit of a breath of relief here for both teams as another charge of battle res comes up for both of them. So they now each have 1 should they need to use it. Emissary of Tides here being kited around in a small circle for Team D. We do know that they CC'd the speaker on the side making, or the Brine Scale, excuse me, on the side making sure that it can't free cast on top of the group until that Emissary dies. I think it's now joined the group. It's somewhere in there, or unless they killed it first. The Emissary is porting away. They actually must have killed it first. So the Emissary is finally poured away. So the group is able to once again crowd control and interrupt the mobs in there. Ludwig von Tortolan now at around 60% HP. Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue as doing pretty much the exact same pull. We can see the Emissary in there. I don't see the Brine Scale on their screen just yet. I'm not sure what they did with it, but they're trying to catch up to Team D right now. You know, they're certainly not out of this yet. Zyra, Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, they're only 2 deaths behind and just a few percent trash behind. Any slip up from Team D, which unfortunately, you know, this was the team that we were touting as be able to hang with the West. They're very innovative. They just had a really sloppy series so far. Today's been okay, but this series has not been so good for them.
No, it hasn't been that good for them. And I mean, to give them credit, they didn't really have. I feel like they didn't really show their best play even in the Springland. I feel like they kind of. It looks like they were a little nervous in the Springland. I remember just watching. They weren't happy with how they played at the LAN at all. But I think, surprisingly enough, I feel like they were one of the more humble teams. They were like, you know, we're okay with just getting top 4. And to their credit, they did end up getting top 4, so they got their goal. But I think most of us kind of had higher expectations for them just based off of how they played and how they developed their strategies. I mean, we keep going back to the Waycrest Manor strat. That really was pretty much a master strat that almost every good Western team ended up trying to copy. So I feel like Team D's, we kind of place them on a higher tier just based off of their strategy making and their route running. And even though they haven't really executed that well in this dungeon so far, it looks like, you know, outside of that one major wipe, they've been pretty clean outside of that. And a lot of the things we say about these teams is it's not necessarily how well you play all the times, it's how you react to how you play. If you have a bad dungeon, if you have a bad pull, you pick yourself back up and go back and play full speed, and that's what they're doing so far.
Yeah, I mean, hey, listen, everybody has bad days. Method, you had a bad day. Unfortunately, the bad day they had was the day that really mattered against NA, and I know they're looking for that revenge at BlizzCon when they get there, but we'll see how that unfolds when we get to it. Team D now has started on Trothak, 80% on this boss as Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue does the exact same thing, but they've fallen a bit further behind on Trash. The amount of time that Team D spent going and killing that double pack with the 2 Brine Scales has to put them just a bit further on Trash versus Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, and they're still 20% behind on the boss. So the gap is kind of widening slightly between these two teams, and a lot of it will definitely come down, well, of course this boss, but it will largely come down to how well they're going to play the Cannon Barrage on Harlan Sweete.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some RNG involved there. I remember in the last Western Cups, Revo Fevi, they pulled the trash on top of the boss and like, okay, we're good, we're waiting for the Cannon Barrage. And then they waited for the Cannon Barrage, and then they waited for the Cannon Barrage, and then their Revo's defensive cooldowns ran out, and the Cannon Barrage still didn't come, so they really have to make sure they time their trash pulls properly around their tank cooldowns. Otherwise, we could see some tank deaths there.
Yeah, I haven't seen that much waiting since waiting for Godot here, but Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue now 70% trash. Still, I believe they actually, did they pull? Yeah, they pulled a bunch of trash on top of Trothak, so they've actually matched the trash percentage for Team D, so a little efficiency bump there from them, and they've closed the gap to only about 8% on the boss. Looking really good here for Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue. Unfortunately for them, not only do they need to close that gap completely, but then overcome Team D's kill time on Harlan Sweete and finishing the dungeon by 10 seconds just because of those 2 deaths. We keep coming back to those 2 deaths, but it's really important when the teams are this closely matched.
And they're even pulling out even more trash on top of the boss, increasing their lead a little bit. We do have the same trash for Team D as well, so it's not that big of an advantage. They're still going to come out to about the same trash percentage, and Team D is going to probably kill this boss about 10-15 seconds before Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue is, so we're going to have to see some insanely efficient pulls out of Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, some perfect execution, or we're going to have to see some slight hiccups from Team D in order for Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue to come back in this dungeon.
I mean, that's what they're hoping, but that's what Team D is trying to avoid at all costs right now as Trothak is about to go down here. 73% trash up on the board for them. They're getting getting ready. I assume 74 actually now. They're probably going to mass stealth through here in just a moment and head over to the bridge past the Void Emissary. Both teams have an Unholy DK. I'm curious to see if the Unholy is going to try to go around and Shadow Meld or just end up taking the L and dying on the side and getting res upstairs.
He could hop on the back of the Druid and jump up pretty easily.
But the Druid can't wild charge if they're not in humanoid form, I think, right?
They can use the travel form wild charge and get up if they do it in the exact right spot, but it's kind of difficult to do. We even saw JB messing it up last week.
Okay, well, we'll see what they're able to do here as Mass Entangle comes in from the teams right now. I'm not sure why they actually pull out. They pulled it because the painful motivation, of course, will kill those two mobs, so it's no problem for them. Ab does get up. Unfortunately, leaves his Unholy DK buddy behind, which we can see scurrying along the side there. Mog having a bit of trouble here right now. I guess just got a bit too close for the... Oh, no, he was actually helping pull the trash away so that the DK can get up and use the Shadow Melt, but unfortunately did not manage to execute it too properly. So 1 death on the board, plus 5 seconds, plus the amount of time that they needed to res, and Harlan Sweete's already 92% here for Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue. Bloodlust has been popped, and they're trying to get all this trash on top of the Cannonball Barrage. This is a close one here, Zyro.
What did Supreme do to get by? Because that whatever he did to get by, even if it was just an invis pot, that gave them the advantage they have in this dungeon now. I mean, they're already they're 15% ahead on the boss. Bloodlust is popped. They're going to start chewing through this boss as well as the trash, and it's going to come down to how efficiently they use those cannonballs.
Well, I mean, these DKs are able to just scurry up the side and then use their Shadow Meld. There's no reason they can't, as long as they survive. That's what Team D was trying to do, but Mog got caught and killed while he was trying to pull the trash away for long. So a much sloppier version of the pull, of the skip rather, that Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue managed to pull off. They're 13% ahead on the boss right now. They still have 1 death extra on the board, so they have to overcome this boss by at least 5 seconds. Bloodlust about to wear off here for Team D, looking to finish off these 2 Enforcers as well. 85% trash for Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue versus Team D's, likely to be around 85-87 in just a moment once this trash dies.
If here comes a second trash pack, they're looking for those cannon barrages to be stacked on top of the boss. Hopefully good positioning. You have to keep an eye on the tank HP here because they're taking a lot of damage when all this trash is up. Cannon barrages need to finish off this trash for them if they want to be efficient. It looks like they're going to get it all down. They'll just have that Oarsman to deal with. It didn't get completely cleaved down, but with an Outlaw Rogue and Holy DK comp, they should be just fine in cleaving it down. We know the last percentage is going to come from this final cannon barrage and maybe a Ravager afterwards. I think the Ravager's going to be too slow. I think they're going to opt to try to just finish it off with his last cannon barrage.
Yeah, they got 7% left, and they just pulled the Commander pack on top of that remaining Oarsman, so they should have the percentage they need here. They're not going to wait for the Ravager at all. Harlan Sweete here, 54% for Team D, desperately trying to catch up. Here's a Cannonball Barrage for them. The officers in there, along with the 2 Buccaneers, they definitely need more trash. That's only going to take them to around 93-94%. And Harlan Sweete here falling rapidly as he hits his last phase, taking 100% increased damage, Zyro.
Dude, Buff or Nerf Rogue, they have gotten a damage boost out of nowhere. They are playing insane out of their minds right now. Team D, you've got to come up with something or you're out of this tournament.
No, I mean, there's just no way. Officers about to fall here from the Cannonball Barrage, and Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue takes the series 2.
But Buff or Nerf Rogue, hey, that's all they needed. They took it. They sealed the deal with that quick 2-0 onto that one's ironic. It was incredibly impressive.
I'm super happy for Supreme right now. I keep picturing him when we killed Queen of Shar. He was slamming his desk like crazy. I can picture him doing that back home right now. You know, he's been practicing really hard for this for the past week and a half. So just super happy for my teammate there. They played very well.
Played incredibly well, so they'll be taking home that big pot of points there with 210 for Buff or Nerf Rogue. So again, we have that 50% increase in points for this season in